Okay. Hello, hello. Did you hear me? You can hear? Okay. All right. Today is Tuesday, March 2nd, 2023. I call this special meeting to order at 3:33 p.m. 6:30. Oh, sorry. 6:33 p.m. All right. Clerk, roll call, please.
Mayor Ding,
Here.
Vice Mayor Harrington,
Here.
Councilmember Chan,
Here.
Councilmember Menchaca,
Here.
Councilmember Wu,
Here.
Chair Cluwiter,
Here.
Commissioner Kratman, Commissioner Lee,
Here.
Commissioner McMorris,
Here.
Commissioner Schwartz.
Here. We will now have some announcement from our chief city clerk.
Tonight's meeting is live streamed on Cable Channel 3 and our online platforms. If you wish to address the City Council on items on this agenda only, we request that you please complete a speaker's card and hand it to the Assistant City Clerk. Council will hear from the public after the staff presentation and clarifying questions for each item. Comments are limited to 3 minutes. When speaking, please state your name for the record.
First item, please.
City Council and Planning Commission Joint Study Session, Inclusionary Housing and Density Bonus Expanded Recommendation Memorandum. Planning Manager Samantha Tawassart will make the presentation.
Yes, good evening, Mayor, members of the City Council, Chairman, and members of the Planning Commission. Thank you for providing this opportunity for staff to bring back the recommendation memorandum and feasibility study for inclusionary housing and density bonus. In response to the comments provided by the City Council at the September 6, 2022 meeting, David Bergman of Lisa Wise Consulting, LWC, is present this evening to present and to outline the expanded analyses. Following the presentation, staff and LWC are seeking comments and guidance, direction from the City Council and Planning Commission, including thoughts on whether to move forward with the drafting of 2 ordinances. One would be to would update the city's existing density bonus ordinance, and the second would be to draft an ordinance to provide new regulations for inclusionary housing. Both ordinances would be presented to the Planning Commission for recommendation and then to City Council for further consideration and adoption. No actions are required of the Planning Commission or City Council this evening, only thoughts and direction. And there are 2 areas of consideration this evening. One being the recommendation that is included in the memorandum, and the second being the alternative options before the Commission and the Council, including setting a different percentage than what's indicated in the memorandum, or not taking any actions and bringing back inclusionary housing at a later time. So that's what's before the City Council this evening, just an item of discussion. And so with that, I'm going to hand the presentation over to David Bergman with LWC.
Thank you, Council Commission. Pleased to be back here again with this expanded analysis. Present to you all, responding to the questions and considerations for us as part of our initial review of the. Is it picking me up? Of the housing, inclusionary housing ordinance and density bonus. Now, just to contextualize it, this work was adjunct or part of the housing element update for the 6th cycle. And so this work flows through sort of naturally from conversations, from issues raised in the housing element and reaction to state requirements for communities to react to the provision of new provisions in state law to encourage housing development. So I'm going to present on 4 topics today that, again, refer back to the memorandum that's been included in your packet, which is first to give a quick overview of what the inclusionary housing ordinance does and how it's similar to or interacts with a density bonus ordinance, both the state density bonus and the opportunity for a local density bonus. Then talk a little bit about a financial feasibility analysis where we tested 3 prototypes for housing typologies, multi-unit housing typologies, using current market information that we had available and what the algebra suggests. And that's really all this is running through a development pro forma to suggest what is currently feasible here in San Gabriel and then how there might be room for an inclusionary requirement. Taking a look at what some of those options might be. Again, this is not determinative. The goal here is to give you information to decide what policy direction you want to move forward with. And then finally, recommendations that talk about what some of the implications are, particularly for the inclusionary ordinance, and then some comments over the density bonus. So first, we'll talk about inclusionary housing and density bonus. So what is an inclusionary housing ordinance? Inclusionary housing ordinance is a optional ordinance that is adopted at the local level. That's part of the zoning code, and it is not, there's not a state mandate to have a inclusionary housing ordinance, although many cities are looking at it as an important tool for incentivizing in creating public-private partnerships for the provision of below market rate housing, so of affordable units. It requires developers to provide on-site affordable units or pay an in lieu fee into a trust fund that would be used to provide affordable housing off-site. Again, it's adopted at the local or the city level, and it's mandatory on the any development application that met the thresholds in the ordinance would be required to set aside units or create units or pay the in lieu fee. Again, so this is mandatory with the development application. This is different from the density bonus. And the density bonus is a state law that is voluntary, that a developer can access and choose to use, that essentially allows for incentives and concessions or sort of overrides on the local zoning code to let an applicant have more units than would be typically allowed. This is, again, something that you get incentives and concessions in exchange for providing different thresholds of affordable units within your development application. Again, this is voluntary for a developer to access. Okay. So many communities across the state, particularly in light of the increased targets that have come in the 6th cycle housing element, have been looking at adding or modifying or optimizing their inclusionary ordinances. Some communities have them already in place. Many communities like San Gabriel are considering adopting them, and some communities that have had them are looking to optimize them based on ongoing analyses of the performance of those ordinances. So let's take a look at 4 communities that are nearby. One, Pasadena, has a for sale inclusionary rate of 20%, and also the same for rental. So for sale and for rental, and then they stagger it in the rentals to require 5% very low income, 5% low or very low income, and 10% low, very low, or moderate income. So you have to choose from a menu to get to that 20% in Pasadena. South Pasadena has a 20% moderate income requirement on its for sale units and a 20% requirement split between extremely low or very low income and low income. Now, one thing that's important to realize is that South Pasadena realized in their analysis, in their housing element, in their constraints analysis, that the 20% inclusionary rate was impeding private investment, that it was too high given the market conditions in South Pasadena. And one of their programs is to go back and revisit this and lower it to 15%, again, so that the 20% inclusionary rate is not a constraint to the production of housing. One thing to keep in mind is that the state law, AB 1505, that allowed for these inclusionary housing, or this is the so-called Palmer fix that allows it for rentals. It actually requires when a community has their for rent inclusionary percentage over 15%, requires that you produce an economic justification to HCD to show that you're not creating a constraint. Because the fear the state legislatures had, and in some cases it was true, which is that communities then would put a very high bar on inclusionary housing, making it infeasible, and therefore undermine the whole intent of the legislation. So it's something to keep in mind with these higher rates, that you do need to justify them to HCD. Alhambra has a 15% in for sale, and it's inclusionary for rental. And likewise, so does Claremont as well. And different splits between the communities. And really, what influences this in many respects are the market conditions, because within these communities here, there's some variation in land costs. Land costs are going to be a little bit higher in Pasadena and South Pasadena than they are in San Gabriel. But also what the sales prices are for the units. The construction costs are going to be roughly the same throughout the San Gabriel Valley. A little bit of variation on fees and permits between cities, but the difference is going to be what the market will pay. And as you can see here, right, San Gabriel, this is a median condominium sales prices over the last decade, right in the middle of the pack of these 5 communities. And again, you'll note that Pasadena and South Pasadena have that 20% inclusionary, whereas Alhambra and Claremont have 15% inclusionary. And then you'll see the kind of the more, where San Gabriel is a little bit more of an outlier than being in the middle, is on rents, average monthly rents, which are appreciably higher in South Pasadena and Claremont than they are in San Gabriel. That right now the achievable rents in San Gabriel for a 2-bedroom apartment are considerably lower than those peer communities, right? So with the market conditions in mind, we undertook a financial feasibility analysis based on some development prototypes, looking at your existing zoning and looking at current development costs and taking into account these sales and rental levels that we just described, to try and determine at what point does increasing an inclusionary requirement start to tip a project into infeasibility. So that's the goal, and to present a range of options that come through from that analysis. So there's a sort of a 3-step process. We worked with city staff to think about some design prototypes that would make sense, the kind of projects that applicants are putting forward right now or would fit within the city's zoning code. And then we, again, look at market conditions, land costs, capital costs for development, and revenues, and then build the pro forma, the developer side pro forma, to analyze what would be feasible in San Gabriel, given existing market conditions. So we looked at a couple of prototypes in the MUC zone. Okay, key assumption here is that it's a 20,000 square foot parcel. The height is 4 stories, FAR of 2.0, and it would be a mixed use. So we did factor in about 3,000 square feet of ground floor retail. And the parking is assumed to be a mix of surface and podium parking. Now, I will say that with the passage of 2097, maybe 2097, which it means that if this site were in a transit corridor, again, this is a hypothetical site, but you may have sites in San Gabriel that would be subject to 2097, in which case you cannot use the city zoning code to set a minimum parking standard. So the parking, which is a really important part of the cost structure for multifamily housing, both for sale and for rent, that could be potentially reduced if the site were eligible for the state mandated parking reductions under 2097. So as you can see here, we looked at the for sale and for rent. The units are a little bit smaller in the rental scenario assumption, so you get a few more units than you would in the for sale. But this is how the assumptions work out. Unit mix. We're talking about a 19-unit project on a 20,000 square foot parcel for sale, or about a 28-unit project on a 20,000 square foot parcel if it's for rent. And then we took a look in the R3 zone, same set of assumptions, looking at your existing zoning, heights of 3 stories, 24 DUs per acre. This assumes a residential use only in the R3. Again, looking at the difference between multifamily for sale and multifamily for rent. And again, this would be an 11-unit for sale project in the R3 zone. Again, the unit size is a little bit smaller, but just because of the nature of the site and the number of DUs per acre, even with the smaller unit size and unit mix of just being 2 bedrooms, you get a little bit fewer well, it's the same number of units work out in the given the building envelope. A little bit lower FAR, but it's de minimis, the difference. So the financial feasibility model, what do we mean when we talk about financial feasibility? You look at the development costs, what the total cost of developing a project is, and that includes land, that includes the hard costs, so-called bricks and sticks and labor to put it together. That also includes the soft costs, permitting, and developer profit. And then compare that to the capitalized value, or what the rent stream is, or the sales value. And the sales value, or the value of the rent stream, is higher than the cost to produce the project, including a developer profit. It's considered to be feasible. And if it's less than that expected return, it's considered to be infeasible. So now the challenge with crafting a inclusionary housing program is that you want to maximize the efficiency of the requirement. As you increase the number of affordable units, right? As you increase the inclusionary percentage, you increase the production of units from the applicant until you reach a tipping point when you go into infeasibility, and then that drops to 0, right? So again, you really want to err on the side of not tipping projects into infeasibility, because that will produce no affordable units. So you want to be looking at where you are to remain feasible. That's why this analysis is important. And it varies from community to community, because an important factor in this, right, are the rents and the achievable sales prices. So that's going to differ, within the San Gabriel Valley, the rents that you get, the sales price that you get. So having the same doing this just copying a neighbor sometimes won't get the exact same results that you'll have, that you'll see. So again, this is just a graphic illustration of what I was saying before about how we determine what is financially feasible. We look at the revenues and you compare it against development costs, which include land costs, which vary, hard costs, which are more or less the same between the communities that we've been talking about, soft costs, which there can be some variation based on fees and permitting costs, and then finally the developer profit. So what does this analysis suggest for San Gabriel, given the fact that there's differing levels of revenues that come against the capital costs? So right now, the prototypes, if you were doing those 100% market rate projects, either rental or for sale in the mixed use commercial district, they're feasible today. And that makes sense because you're getting applications from people to do these kinds of projects and interest, developer interest. The same thing with the for sale in the R3. Interestingly, given current market rents right now, rentals are the current market rental rates are not enough to support private investment, all things being equal, for rental units in the R3. Now, when I say all things being equal, different developers have different perspectives, right? Someone may have a very low cost basis on the land. They may have owned it already. Someone may be financing it and have a higher cost of capital. Somebody may be paying it for all cash and have a lower cost of capital. So these are broad strokes. We've held them to be constant for this analysis, but you could find a circumstance where somebody is all cash, has owned land for a long time, and a project becomes feasible for them that might not be feasible elsewhere in the market. But in general, right now, looking at the market in San Gabriel, you can do 100% market rate for sale and rental projects in your mixed use commercial district. Do for sale in your R3, it's tough to see it happening as a rental in your R3 district. Now, taking a look at what happens if a developer accesses, puts in affordable units, right? Percent of what level of affordability can you put on site if you either don't apply the state density bonus, right? And the state density bonus is triggered automatically when you go above certain thresholds of the type of units that you can apply. So it's above 10% for, again, this depends a little bit, it's complicated on the mix of units, but 10% of or less affordable, you don't automatically access the state density bonus. Above that, then you do get the state density bonus. So then you get additional market rate units at 35% bonus. So that changes the feasibility a little bit. So if you don't use the state density bonus, you can get in the for sale in the mixed use commercial, low and moderate units at 10%, its project still feasible. A little bit less in the R3, it's a little bit less intense, right? But you could get roughly the same 9% affordability. Now for rentals, again, because the rental rates that are being achieved right now in San Gabriel are lower than some of its peer communities, it becomes difficult to make feasible these rental projects without accessing the state density bonus. Now, if you look in the last column where then a developer would choose to go above that 10%, and also if, by the way, if the inclusionary goes above 10%, then automatically a developer would qualify for the state density bonus and they would take it, because why would you leave the FAR or the additional units on the table? I mean, generally speaking, that will be used. So when you go above 10%, you kind of compel or force. It's not a legal force, but sort of the market leads you towards that every application taking on the state density bonus. You can see that there, the range, once you get that 35% density bonus, you can support a lot of low and moderate income in the mixed use commercial, about 25 or 24% in the for sale product, a little bit less on the rental. And then the same pattern repeats again in the R3. But again, still, even with the density bonus, the rental rates today in San Gabriel are not high enough to justify, even with the state density bonus, to be feasible. So this leads to some options. And that's really what these recommendations are, options for the Planning Commission, City Council, the community to consider what way they want to go. And I will say this, before I sort of launch into this and recommendations. Because market conditions play such an important role in this, whatever decisions you do eventually make, it's probably a good idea to revisit in 2 years. Just like you do with your fee structure, your impact fees, right? You do a fee study every 2 years to keep those current. And I think looking at inclusionary housing in the same way that you look at your fee structure, I think is a helpful lens to understand that this is not cast in stone, that you want to be reactive as the market conditions change and as circumstances in the housing in the housing environment change. And also, by the way, the state law is very dynamic. That goes to the density bonus. We can expect additional changes in the coming years coming from Sacramento about zoning and land use controls, like examples about it could be possible that the minimum parking requirements could be extended even away from transit. And that would change these feasibility studies because you wouldn't have to provide off-street parking. Just as one example. I don't mean to frighten anybody, but as long as Sacramento is meeting, anything can happen is what we've learned over the last few years. So, it's something to keep in mind. So one thing to think about is generally, let's take a look at what would happen if you set your inclusionary rate at for the for sale at less than 10%, at 10%, or greater than 10% for the for sale. And then let's look at the implications of where you would set the rate for rental units. And these are implications here. So if you did it at less than 10%, the projects would not be eligible just automatically. A developer could add more units, but you wouldn't be compelling them to be able to access the state density bonus. So you do it less than 10%. It doesn't automatically trigger eligibility for the state density bonus. And that's an advantage, right? So that you have the land use controls that you anticipate in your zoning code and general plan. And this is true for both the low and moderate, being less than 10%. The disadvantage is that you are leaving some capacity on the table to produce more affordable units, right? If it's a higher level and it's still feasible, your inclusionary ordinance is not optimized in terms of the number of units that it's going to produce. It'll still produce the number of less than 10%, but it's not optimized. If you do the for sale at 10, right, the state density bonus can kick in. It's for moderate and low income. The advantages are that you're not likely to slow down development. You can make it a moderate requirement. Affordable units for a low. If you just do it as a moderate requirement, then you're not going to produce any low income units, but certainly you're not going to burden development. You could make it all low. That will increase the number of lower income units in the city. However, income limits do fluctuate. We're in kind of a weird time right now with the income bands. There's compression in them in the way the federal government uses its formula. It's not the straight 80% of median income that it used to be. They give a bonus for is being a high cost housing area. So you'll notice that the difference between low and the median is very small in LA County. So it's a quirk that we're dealing with, and that is a future risk as well, that those numbers may change over time. You could choose a moderate or a low, the developer's discretion. Generally speaking, developers will choose the moderate income because they get more revenue from it, right? But it gives them some flexibility. Or you could split it half and half moderate, or some combination, between moderate and low. That gives some flexibility. But then again, you may be producing fewer lower income units. Now, if you look at it more than 10%, right? Again, you would trigger the state density bonus for projects. Projects will be able to produce a greater number of affordable units. You increase that percentage, right? As long as we don't go over that dashed line where we tip into infeasibility, this is a good thing. Although now the other thing for you to consider is that when you do that, everybody's going to take the state density bonus and get concessions and incentives. If market conditions change, we go into recession, interest rates increase, all of these things that are in the near term, this may slow the production of units. So again, going back to my earlier comments, good to kind of be checking this like you do with all your fees. Now, rental. And already right now, it's tough to do market rate rental in San Gabriel. Again, just because those rents are, the achievable rents today are lower than they are in neighboring communities. So because of that, any rate that you're going to do, if somebody is able to, for example, if they have that real low cost basis on land, and they're all doing an all cash deal, they're not financing it, and they may have a different expectation about their return, right? Every applicant is different. But if the cards break in your direction, then this could produce some affordable rental units, right? But for the standard project where someone's acquiring land at market rate, financing the development at market rates, it's not going to be feasible today. This is going to only make that more difficult. So it's something to consider, that exceptional case. Do you want to be able to attach or compel to that exceptional case the opportunity to produce affordable units or not? This is a policy question. So the recommendations. The recommendations are just summarizing what I've said before, which is that you probably want to take a look at a 10% inclusionary requirement on the for sale units, splitting between low income and moderate income. You could increase that, and projects could continue to be feasible. But again, remember, as you increase this, you produce more units, you eventually hit a point where you can tip into infeasibility. Rental, again, today, the economics of doing new rental is difficult. So you might want to consider not burdening it with requiring inclusionary units. Although, on the other hand, there might be circumstances where it would be good to have on the books. This is something to come back and consider also in 2 years. Maybe market conditions change. Rents get to be a little bit higher here. Market rate rents get to be a little bit higher. Construction costs stabilize. We go back to a low interest rate environment. 2 years, the world can change. And then in terms of the density bonus law, we're going to recommend that you refer back to the state government code rather than spelling out in the zoning code what the density bonus rules are, just because the state is going to keep changing what's required. It's just, this is something that's good practice that many cities are doing, which is putting their density bonus, unless they do a local super density bonus, if they're just following the state, referring back to the state government code in the zoning code. So this is kind of the presentation, and I guess I want to reiterate the idea that this is a balancing act, and it's a tough choice for the community to make, because, and you may find, like South Pasadena has, that having a very high inclusionary rate actually crosses over that point of feasibility, and you find yourself in a circumstance where you're actually creating a constraint on private investment in housing. On the other hand, you don't want to set it too low and leave the opportunity to produce affordable units on the table. It's a public good and a necessary thing to do through your zoning code. And that's why many communities across the state, and particularly this is a very common tool in meeting communities' RENA requirements, is to set up this regulatory environment that creates a public-private partnership for the production of below market rate housing. That, if you have questions or any ideas that you'd like me to address, I'd be happy to discuss it.
Can you clarify what it is? State density bonus.
I wish I could clarify it. No, it's a very complex piece of legislation. The simplest thing to say is that there are certain requirements. If you do senior housing, if you do moderate income housing, or lower amounts of low or very low income housing, you get what are called incentives and concessions. And what those include is the opportunity to have a 35% increase in the unit count that is allowed by the zoning. So you get to build 35% more units than the base zoning allows. And you get like a trump card to overcome something like height limits or setbacks or some other kind of development standard that you as an applicant might want to overcome. So it can be attractive to developers to use it. Communities, I would say, have concerns about it because it overrides the development standards in the existing zoning. There's more to it. There's a lot of case laws, as you can imagine. It's California. Things have been litigated. There's other complications in it, but that's the basic story. Yes, you can get relief on the parking requirements as one of your concessions.
Okay, does any council and the commission member have a factual question for staff to clarify the report?
I actually have quite a few questions. for staff.
Commissioner McGraw, okay,
Oh,
yeah,
yeah.
okay.
Oh, okay. If it's all right, though, I'd like to just first provide some context. Because you talked a little bit about the city would need to justify anything that it does here. So just to kind of lay out the situation in San Gabriel, this is information from our housing element, our new housing element. San Gabriel is a majority renter city of 55% renters. San Gabriel has a lower income population than the county. Over half, 58% of all San Gabriel households are low income households. Rents are slightly higher in San Gabriel than in the county. Nearly 6 out of 10 San Gabriel renters are housing cost burdened, which means they spend 30% or more of their gross income on housing costs. And out of that, 32% are severely cost burdened, which means they pay over 50% of their total paychecks on rent or housing. From 2000 to 2018, San Gabriel permitted 346 units, the majority of which were single-family housing. Compared to the larger Southern California governments, which is SCAG region, San Gabriel has consistently permitted fewer units than 1,000. That's the context that we're a majority renter city. Most of what we've been producing lately is single family units. And during calendar year 2020, there were 223 Section 8 program participants that resided in San Gabriel. And then just briefly, there's some summary of public comments for residents who participated in that housing element process that we just finalized. I just wanted to read a couple of their comments. One, housing in San Gabriel is very expensive. It is difficult for families and working people to afford to live in San Gabriel. Long-term renters with dual incomes cannot afford to buy a home in San Gabriel. Another person said, affordable housing is critical, especially for members of the community who work in San Gabriel. There is enthusiasm for a plan to accommodate greater affordable housing in the city. And another person said, affordable rental units are needed. The state of California, in their 2025 statewide housing assessment, said housing costs and related housing instability issues increase healthcare costs for individuals and the state, decrease education outcomes affecting individuals as well as the state's productivity, and make it difficult for California businesses to attract and retain employees. So RENA has mandated, which is the regional housing needs assessment, that over the next 7 years, San Gabriel has to accommodate 3,063 new housing units, of which 58%, that's 1,767, must be affordable or below market rate units. And just for a little more context, I know that they were presented some cities with inclusionary housing ordinance in the area. I just want to give some information that were in these cities' housing elements. So Pasadena, they do 20% affordable now. They used to do 15, but in their last RENA cycle, fifth cycle housing element, they created 432 affordable units and collected over $14 million in lieu fees, which means the city can use that money to build affordable units themselves. So Pasadena also has a concession menu for developers that's in addition to what's in the density bonus. And South Pasadena, they just they adopted their housing ordinance in 2020, so there's not a lot of data on theirs. Same in Alhambra. Their fifth cycle doesn't really represent what was possible. Claremont adopted theirs in 2006, but it was only for for sale units and at moderate income. So they produced 70 over from 2006 to now, they produced 70 units of for sale affordable units. But because they weren't getting any low income units, they just changed their inclusionary housing ordinance to include low income units. And now they have 16 extreme low income and 58 low income units now. And finally, Santa Monica, they adopted their inclusionary housing ordinance in 1990, and they have a 30% IHO. And I just want to read this. The production, so in Santa Monica has produced more. This is from their last RENA cycle, has produced more market rate and affordable units than allocated by RENA in 2013, 2021, producing more than their fair share of affordable housing for the region. They overproduced more than what they were told they needed to produce in Santa Monica, and they're still building a lot there. I just bring that up for context for some of my questions because I have a lot of concerns with what is being recommended. And I don't know if my question should be directed to staff or should be directed to the consultant or both. But my first question is, given the extreme need that was just laid out in our housing element for low and very low income housing, almost 32% of our residents are severely cost burdened with rent. We need to build 797 units of very low income households and 266 units for low income households and 450 units for moderate income households. How is what is being proposed by staff and the consultant going to address those numbers? And if you don't know, that's fine. I just want to get some clarification.
Yes, thank you, Commissioner McMorris. The response to that answer is the recommendation that's provided in the memorandum is a result of the feasibility analysis. It's not based on the demographics or the numbers that were just listed. Staff recognizes that there is that need, and those are findings and reasons that can absolutely be submitted to the Department of Housing and Community Development if in question, and depending on the percentage that is set, depending on whether it exceeds that 10% or whatever the percentage is ultimately decided, or even if the city is going to move forward with an inclusionary ordinance. So the feasibility study does not argue against the numbers that were cited. The recommendation, again, just reflects the market conditions at this time, which is why there were comments about revisiting the ordinance if one were to be drafted at this time.
Thank you. And I will get to the feasibility study in a second, but so in staff's, per staff's September 6, 2022 report, and this is on pages 2 through 3, an inclusionary housing ordinance would be intended to assist to accomplish the city's fair share of very low and moderate income housing needs, facilitate the development of housing to make adequate provision for the housing needs of all economic segments of the community, create jobs and a jobs housing balance, provide people at all income levels more opportunities to live near where they work, reduce segregation and concentration of poverty. This is just kind of a follow-up, and I know you might have the same answer. I just want to get this on the record. what is being proposed as a recommendation? How does no affordable units at any level for rental units in a city that is 55% renter households, of which 60% are housing cost burden, address any of the above goals stated in our housing element?
Yes, again, so the recommendation on rental is a reflection of what is economically feasible. It does not suggest that that is what staff is recommending against to address, again, the numbers that were cited as far as the needs for rental units.
Okay, I understand, but it seems to me that, and thank you for clarifying that staff's not recommending against going higher, but it seems to me in the recommendations that they are. But the ordinance on the staff report from September 6, 2022, the ordinance, it states the ordinance should be directly tied to the findings, establishing the need for the policy. If, for example, the findings cite the shortage of low and very low income housing units in the community, then the ordinance should be crafted to ensure that those units get produced. So our current housing element has established an extreme need for affordable housing. 58% of all new housing needs to be affordable in our city, mostly in the lower income ranges. The housing element has also established that the greatest need for affordable housing is in the rental market here in San Gabriel. And so, again, I just want to reiterate, I don't think what staff has recommended is going to do anything. And according to that same staff report, housing development means a development project for 5 or more residential units, including mixed-use developments. Now, that's what the state says. I don't know if we can change that threshold or not, but if we're using that threshold of 5 as when they have to start creating more affordable units, I did ask, and staff provided me with the information, how many of the for sale units over the last 5 years in this city were units that were over 5. And the response I got that was that 55% of those, all of those multi for sale units built in the last 5 years were less than 5. So I'm just saying that because even the 10% that's being recommended for sale units would not do very, it would do very, very little, because what's being built right now in for sale condos are projects that are less than 5. So I just want to address some things about clarity on the methodology, and then I'll let my fellow council members and commissioners ask questions too. Regarding the methodology, why does the analysis one not use the feasibility results from the analysis of the prototypes with state density bonus applied to establish its inclusionary ordinance rate? So this is on page 52 of the analysis memo. And 2, why does the analysis assume that developers will not use the state's density bonus law, especially if we require them to build 10% or more affordable units in their projects, which is going to trigger the state density bonus usage?
Yeah, so I would refer you to the appendix of the report. The state density bonus is applied. So if you look, for example, on table A4, that looks at the for sale prototypes with the state density bonus applied. So that it is considered that way. And the reason why we looked at it just with your existing zoning is because it's voluntary, whether or not a development application would access the state density bonus or not. So it's in there. And again, the reason is we wanted to have a fair comparison between what your code allows today.
I guess, thank you for that. I guess I understand. I saw that it was in there, but that's not what was being recommended. It didn't seem like that was being considered in the recommendations, because you're recommending 10% for sale only, but yet you're showing that if a developer uses a density bonus, which is going to trigger if we say have an IHO of 15, 20%, why are they not going to use it? Because I know that it says in the analysis a developer may choose not to use it. I just don't understand why they would choose not to use it if they're going to have to build a number of affordable units because of an IHO, where it would qualify. That density bonus is going to make the project feasible for them.
I'd refer you to the slide in the presentation that's on the screen now that answers that question.
What I guess, but my question was, why wouldn't a developer use it if we're requiring them to build 15% affordable units?
No, they would automatically apply. So I'd refer you to the
Yeah.
to the column on the far right.
Okay, I see that. It's just that I'm glad for this clarification. I really struggled reading this because I'm seeing that there. I'm seeing the 10% with no density, and then next I'm seeing with density bonus. But we're saying that, so they're basically an IHO, is that saying that an IHO of 24% moderate income is feasible if the density bonus is included? Am I correct in assuming that?
Yes, in for sale products.
Okay. So
In the mixed use commercial, is for 24% for sale, 14% moderate, with the state density bonus on the rental. So there is some differences there.
Yeah.
But yes, you could set it at 24%. It's a policy decision. Of course, over 15%, you need to get approval from HCD. And I'm going to give you a little background on why that is. Many communities, when the so-called Palmer fix came into place in 2017, that sort of allowed the current generation of inclusionary housing ordinances to be legal in California. Many communities set a very high bar on their inclusionary housing with the explicit goal of excluding and making infeasible rental units in their community. So to avoid that, the state wants to make sure that the bar is not set too high by making projects infeasible. It's just the math. This is not a question of whether you should have affordable units or not in your community, but are you burdening them with a fee that tips them into infeasibility?
No, I understand that, but the whole point of the density bonus is that it's taking into account that drop in feasibility if you don't have the density bonus by providing those developers with extra market rate units to compensate for that, right?
So the density bonus has really come into play in the last handful of years in the Southern California market as market rates for rentals have approached $3.50 a square foot for rentals, and then you start to be able to pay off the difference. But the state density bonus has been in place for decades before it started being used. The fact that we've had this escalation in prices makes it feasible. And the 35% is a cap. It's not like you can get extra density unless there's a local density bonus, which some communities have chosen to do to sort of offset the fact that the most you're getting right now is about $3.50 a square foot. And that's with, the lower interest rate environment. Today, I think right now in San Gabriel, you'd be challenged to get that level of rent on new construction. And therefore, it would be less appealing for an investor to go ahead and develop rental, even using the density bonus. They can't, that 35% is not valuable enough today, given the existing rents. And just one other thing to sort of step back, this inclusionary ordinance is a great tool, an important tool that many communities are considering using for the creation of affordable housing, because it kind of forces a public-private partnership, right? But it's not the only tool. And so one of the recommendations, which is not stated here, is that you should go look at your housing element, which me and staff prepared and presented to you all, and look at all of those programs and see how the inclusionary program can play a role, important, in the overall strategy for the provision of affordable units.
I understand that, and I'm honestly going to recommend some of those additional tools. But so you're saying now that if I guess you're showing on that slide that it's feasible with the density bonus, but then you just said it may not be feasible,
No, rental units are not feasible.
rental or not. So I have a question about our rental. In the data that we used, is that data, I'll make sure I'm wording this correctly, but is that the data? So you show in that chart from 2014 to 2022, average monthly rent and San Gabriel's is the lowest. And so that's an average from 2014 to 2022. Is that correct?
No, that's just each year. So again, I'd refer you
Each-
back. I'd refer you back to, oops, wrong direction. Rental rates.
Yeah.
So it's average monthly rental rate each year, annual average.
Uh-huh. So does that take into account that the majority of San Gabriel's housing stock is, according to our general plan, 60 plus years old? Compared, so isn't it reasonable to assume that the new projects that are coming in, rental, we have a couple of big ones coming in that have been approved. I would assume the rents are going to be higher in those new units than what they are in a 60-year-old unit.
So we modeled the revenue based on what's being achieved today
Yeah,
in the aggregate.
I
And
understand.
that's a good reason to revisit these in a few years as market conditions change. That gap between the rental rates in San Gabriel and Pasadena may compress, although it's been pretty durable for the last decade.
It has, but we've only been building single-family units according to the data. We haven't been building rental units, but we got a couple of really big projects that just got approved that are coming in, and we've got some in the pipeline. So I just bring that up because I'm looking at the index where you show all of the housing units in the back here in the packet we got for rental. And we're comparing Pasadena units that were built in 2021, their rent compared to San Gabriel apartments that were built in 1963, 53, 1983, 88, 71, and a great deal of them, there's no year at all. So I'm assuming that we couldn't find the year because they were so old. I don't know, but I'm just bringing that up because if we're looking at, and I want to just clarify this because I want to make sure I'm understanding the analysis correctly. If we're looking at housing costs right now, which are extremely high because of the various reasons, I'm assuming the pandemic, the war in Ukraine, they're going to stay. I think it's fair to assume they're going to stabilize at some point. I even have somewhere in here, I cited a Caldwell Banker report that said they're predicted in 2023 to 2024 to stabilize back to 2% to 4%. But if we're looking at extremely high housing costs right now, and we're looking at average rents from old rental stock, not accounting for not differentiating between rental units that were built in the last 10 years. We're not taking into account, correct me if I'm wrong, whether this old stock has been paid off by the owner or not, which means they're not any longer paying off any debt on that complex. That the costs when they built that complex were much lower 60 years ago than they are now. All of those things come into play. And if we're looking at, and I believe in a footnote I read here, the analysis is static. It's for right now. But we're at a historic inflation right now. Everything goes up. And I did some data and, I crunched some numbers because you had here, I guess isn't it fair to assume even though the costs go up, the owner of the complex is going to pass that cost on to the renter? And I think I crunched some numbers based on the what you provided in here. I'm trying to find the chart because you show basically a chart of monthly rent. So based on what was here, what you provided was you provided a study from 2009 to 2018. California's building costs increased 25%. And then there's a gap of 2 years. And then you show another study from 2021 to 2022 alone, it increased 19%. Now taking into account there's a 2-year gap, that's 44% total from 2009. I went over and I looked at the rise in cost in for sale condos in San Gabriel and the rise in cost in rent from 2014 to 2022. And from 2012 to 2022, if I'm correct here, based on what they're showing the cost was, the for sale price increased 47%. So that extra building cost is being they're making a profit, is my point. So yes, the costs are raised, but they're still making a profit because they're passing the costs off to the renter. The same for the rent. Even though San Gabriel rent is lower, it's still increased 34%. And keep in mind, that's 3 years that are absent from here that are being included in your data. So that could change. I'm just saying this because I just want to keep in mind that there are so many things in here that there's a lot of what ifs. And I'm finding out that we need, and I know that we need extremely low and low income housing. We are a predominantly rental community. I just would ask that, and I just can't, I personally, and I don't have any idea what my colleagues think. What is being proposed to me is unacceptable. Most people in this city need to rent, not buy. And we don't need moderate income. We do, but most of it needs to be low and very low. And so if we have a state density bonus, which is a tool that a developer would use, if we say you need to build 15 to 20% affordable units, they're going to know upfront what the game is here in San Gabriel, what they're working with. They can include that into their pro formas. They're going to use the density bonus. Why wouldn't they? So,
Commissioner McMorris, if I might just interrupt for a minute. I just want to remind the commission and the members of the council here too that we're currently in questions of staff phase, and we should take public comment before we start to go into deliberations or expressing opinions to staff on final direction.
Apologies. I'll stop there. And I thank staff and consultant both. Thank you for answering my questions. I appreciate it.
Mayor, I have a few clarifying questions.
Yeah, I just want to maybe everybody the question. Can we ensure some minutes, maybe 3 to 5 minutes for each person? If you have second question, then can ask him again. Is it okay? So, and is there any clarifier question? Let me try to give it to Commissioner first. Any clarify question for your Commissioner? If not, so we start from a council member. Council member Menchak.
Great, thank you. I just had a few. So I just want to make it clear that this feasibility study is based on assumptions. And so you change the assumptions, you'll change the you'll change the results, obviously. And so you talked about market conditions changing. You talked about incentives to developers. I noticed that Agenda 2, which we're going to be discussing after this, there's some relevant laws that are coming into place that will change the results here. How are we, I feel like we're going backwards a little bit. Maybe we should have started with Agenda 2, but I think most people here are Agenda 1. How is staff or the consultant factoring that in the feasibility study? Is this as of, because this doesn't seem to have changed. I mean, back in September of 2022, looks like it's the same thing. So is that based on conditions last year? Or because these laws that we're going to talk about in Agenda Item 2 take effect in July. So can you just clarify how that's going to be
So one thing
impact
I
on-
mentioned is the parking reduction. And parking is a huge expense in housing. And it's particularly in rental, it becomes a problem because it's a capital cost that you have to develop as an applicant, as a developer, but you don't typically get revenue back from it. So where the the transit zones, we have not analyzed this, as these are free floating sites. They're not specifics, but a site that was able to access that transit incentive starting in July would not have to require or provide any off-street parking. That would significantly reduce the capital cost and make a project more feasible.
Exactly. And I think there's a sequel also. But all these laws, you're right, they keep changing, but they're definitely going one direction. They're very progressive, and a lot more is being, a lot more concessions, a lot more, incentives to build affordable housing. So I think that would definitely change the study. The other thing I had asked last year too is to define affordability, and I couldn't see that anywhere. Maybe I missed it. But for example, moderate income, that means something different to everyone. When we talk about rental, and I'll just focus on the rental for now, are we looking at 2,000 per month, or 1,500? Is that considered low? 1,000 per month, very low? I don't know. If you can please clarify.
Right. So there's a couple of things here. It's done off of median incomes. So, and then again, as I mentioned before, there's compression in LA County because it's a federal formula. But so right now in extremely low is 30% of average or less, very low is 30 to 50%.
Could you give me dollar amounts?
Yeah. So let's see, the median household income, the median, what these incomes translate to.
Does it translate to per month, like rental? What are we talking about?
Okay, the maximum purchasing price for a low-income individual would be $315,000, and the maximum rent would be $1,547.
For which one? I'm sorry.
So this is on.
Oh,
Yeah, this is a different document. Yeah.
Yes, no, this is an apology on staff's part. This was a follow-up item when the Second Amendment to LWC's agreement was made. Staff had actually provided that information as part of that staff report. It's information that's also available in the housing element.
Okay, I don't have the housing element in front of me.
Yeah,
Can you
sorry,
just-
apologize for that.
That's okay. If you can just tell me just real briefly, moderate, low, and very low, or extremely low. I'm not sure. Is it the same thing? Low and I mean very low, extremely low. Is that the same thing? So it's even lower. Okay.
Yeah, San Gabriel's medium household income in 2018 was 57,000. Yes, so
The next page is where we
that's
look
the
at
next page.
that translates to housing costs.
So that's
So
moderate.
maximum purchasing price for low income individual, and I'm sorry I don't have these numbers off the top of my head. This was a November 15th document. Thank you, Sam, for having this. 315,000 roughly. Maximum rent would be 1,578 on there. So the maximum purchasing price for that's a low income individual. For a 4-person household, the maximum would be $456,000, and the maximum rent would be $2,253. One thing that's interesting to note in LA County is that lower incomes are people. These are people who are working. This is not an indigent population. These are people.
No, I understand that. Believe me, I understand. Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
People who have anywhere else in America, well, maybe not anywhere else, but outside of California, these are substantial incomes. Right?
So I guess we'll focus a little bit on the moderate. So you said moderate income of 57K per year, which translates to 2,000 per month, or did you say 1,500 for low? I'm getting just let's just focus on the moderate to make it easy.
Well, so the problem is it's for 4-person household.
Oh, okay. So it's
Calculations
kind of
are
hard.
hard to do on the fly.
Yeah.
What? We can follow up with staff and give you a table
Okay.
because you have to set it up kind of as an Excel sheet. But I understand what you're getting at, which is you want to know what are the maximum dollars that a four-person household in each one of these categories, what's the most they can,
Yes.
according to the.
And I think it was help. I mean,
Yeah.
I think I asked for it the last time, but I think it'd be very helpful. Okay. And then my other clarifying question was, in the report, there was a list of the demographics, and it was mentioned by the commissioner, majority rental, renter city, nearly 6 out of 10 San Gabriel renters are housing cost burden. I mean, these are some significant, real uh, uh, numbers. So in this feasibility study, is that any of that taken into consideration at all? Or is it just, well, this is what we can sell and, we're not really looking at our residents, what they can afford or where they are in the income um, spectrum?
The recommendation is not evaluating the need of the city. It is reporting construction costs. And-
Okay. Okay. So then if that's the case, then again, I couldn't find it in the report, but what is our inventory stock, our affordable housing stock? Because my understanding is we have one project that possibly will build. We just don't have the money, looking for grants. But aside from that, we have zero. I mean, we have extreme shortage. We have nothing out there. So this would be our only opportunity to create anything at any level. But is that true? Is there any, I mean, do we have stock of what our affordable housing units are? I mean, do we have any? So I think it's zero. I just want to clarify that.
Not in the form of an agreement that would require a property owner to keep the rates at an affordable level. Prices may be lower because of the age of the
Yes,
unit.
and that was mentioned before.
Yes, but there is currently not a tool in place that would require a property owner.
Okay, so there's no tool. So if we decide to go with should I use the acronyms? IHO, inclusionary housing. This would be our only tool at this time.
Yes, at this time. And
Okay.
Councilwoman, if we can provide the numbers.
Yeah, if you can refer to table 10 in page 14 of the analysis, because I knew we had to figure it somewhere. Didn't have it off the top of my head, but that has the sales prices and rents for low income and moderate income households.
I think it's a different page number.
Yeah, page
47?
14 of our,
Page 47.
Okay, it's 47 for us.
yeah, table 10. And so that shows you the range of rents. And again, it's a little bit complicated, how the housing costs are calculated at 30% of the LA County limits by household size. So it's going to vary on the size of the units, but the least expensive would be a one bedroom for a low income at 80% of AMI could afford up to $321,000. And for rent, a studio for low income would be $1,656 a month in rent, up
Okay.
to a moderate three bedroom of $410,000 or $12,000. That'd be the sales price, or a moderate income rent of a two bedroom at $2,160 here. So those
that table is very helpful. I don't know if the audience has this table, but the fact is we're very focused, or the recommendation is very focused on moderate income. And if we take a studio, that's $1,680. If we take a two bedroom, it's $2,160. I guess to me that's not moderate. That's a very high level. And so I think that's why I wish it would have been in the presentation, but I think it makes us think, it's what does moderate income mean? And I think it probably means something different for everyone, but for me, that's not moderate. That's pretty high. So, okay, thank you. Those are my only clarifying questions.
Thank you. Councilmember Machenko. Who else have to clarify the question? Okay, Councilmember Wu.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have pulled out
the data from the multiple listing service, and I believe the number that shows here is a little bit different from what we have seen here because we are more focusing on the rental price total in lump sum, but we are not really calculating the price per square foot, which is more accurate because when I see for rental market, I try to make that in different category, like from 500 to 1,000 square feet, from 1,000 to 1.5K, and 1.5K to 2,000, because the bedroom doesn't really reflect the actual square footage of the house, but the square footage, the price that really matters. For example, we are currently we are not really have a good inventory in rental market. For example, under 1,000, we have only one on market, which is $2.87 per square foot. So for a $2,650, the people can rent for 922 square feet, which is kind of small. It's more like a studio, maybe one bedrooms. Sometimes they can just divide it in maybe two bedrooms, but that is kind of small. But when we are looking for the more real number, like less than 2,000, from 1,500 to 2,000, that price, the rental price is 1.67 to 2.06. So which means that we are spending $3,350 for 16,000 square feet. So that is about right numbers for the rental. So I'm thinking that if we're doing the rental market, it probably need to go with a very huge discount. My question is, for those developers, and we are talking about the numbers, have you calculated the homeowner association fees? Maybe I would say the property tax, insurance, mortgage, those are also some extra things. But do we have any regulations on those housing, inclusive or affordable housing, that what is the limit? Can we set a limit saying homeowner association don't make a beautiful like a pool because that takes a lot of money from all the residents? I mean, what is there any like particular regulations that they cannot build up those number? Because we understand at the beginning of the time, the homeowner association fee could be like $100, and now we probably can see like $300-400 per month, and that will be really heavy for the homeowners. But also for the sales to transaction, that number is even more scary because what I have seen here, that is from $700 per square foot, which is the time that I saw that is the price in San Marino, but now it's in San Gabriel. Then they are listing the price 649,000 for 927 square feet, which is like a studio type. And there is a one sold property that is $509 per square foot, and it's only 900 square feet. So those are like a very tiny house, very small house, and that is not even good for a family size with 3 people. And if we are calculating we are talking about the 1.5 square feet to 2,000, then unfortunately that you can only afford 1,143 square feet, that which is $621,000. So if we discount 25%, the selling price should be $465,750. I mean, that is still the number way more than the moderate income. I mean, is it a program that we are able to adopt? I mean, if we adopt the program, how we can just make the price more justified for those we call low, very low, or moderate income people, because the number seems like here. I mean, the market tells the price. We are not setting the price here. So what is the good strategy behind the whole presentation? What is the best way that we can just make the program really works for those people who needs the house, but not just making a house name there, but they still cannot afford? Because when I talking about how the homeownerships, they have to pay all the property tax, insurance, and also the mortgage. So if with this income, I mean, is this a really feasible program? If we adopt it, who will be benefited? That's my question. Thank you.
So the income limits are, again, adjusted every year. They're set by a federal formula at the county level.
Mhm.
The idea behind the inclusionary ordinance is that you look at the market rate in the units. And that this again goes back to this slide here. So if we look at 100% market rate on the left, right, you have developer
Mhm.
profit. Then what we try and do is we say, all right, what are the revenues that you get from including affordable units? Because you can't sell them for as much. The sales price is capped,
Mhm.
whether they're moderate or low, to those income limits. And then what's the balance between the market rate and those fixed rates that allow a project to be feasible? So in other words, the whole math is to determine at what percentage of market rates can you subsidize the below market rate units in the development. So that's the whole analysis. That's how these percentages work through those numbers. The other question that you had is, what about the amenities in the unit?
Mhm.
By law, they have to be indistinguishable from the market rate units. And so you can't make them, less attractive. You can't make them, they have to be indistinguishable from the market rate units. That's part of the cost to the developer. Property taxes, if the unit is in what's called a covenant that holds it as only to be available for affordable units, the property taxes is taxed like a public welfare. So there's no property tax. Homeowners association fees, that's a good question. I don't know if you're allowed to apply those on covenant affordable units. But we didn't look at the operations cost of a development. Just again, it's a static pro forma developer side, static pro forma go, no go on the cost of my capital. Will I build a machine that'll have a capitalized value of the rent stream or my sales price at the end of the project to justify it?
So we were talking about 25% bonus density. Is that correct?
Well, so you're entitled, if you go to access the state density bonus, 35% increase in units. But in exchange, you need to provide affordable units. And this goes to the earlier question. This has been on the books for many years in the state, and people didn't exercise it. Why have they been exercising it more recently? Because the costs are high enough to justify the subsidies that are underneath it. The tipping point seems to be about $3, $3.50 a square foot. That's kind of the tipping point at which it's worthwhile to get that extra 35% of market rate units. Depending on the land cost, it varies.
So, I mean, with this program, that were we able to evaluate what is a reasonable price when they are marketing that as affordable housing?
It'll be set by law.
It was set by law, right? Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Vice Mayor Harrington.
Thank you, Mayor. So I wanted to see if you could go into further detail on the state density bonuses, what type of units would a developer need to build for both rental and for sale units? So what's the breakdown as far as low, moderate, senior, what the types of housing required?
I think you get it for 100% senior. You get it for 10% moderate and 5% low or variable.
Got it. That's for both rental and for sale?
Yeah.
So my question then on that, if that penciled out, why wouldn't a developer do it?
That it would. That's what we're saying, which is that
I'm talking without an inclusionary housing or
yeah, that's optional. And a developer can access that by state law in every community of the state as it stands today.
And so what we're really doing then with an inclusionary housing is creating a floor, not a ceiling.
Correct. That's the right way to think about it.
So we've created a floor that's pressuring them to go into the higher density.
It could if you set it above 10%.
If you keep pushing it.
Correct.
So we what we're doing is we're putting our thumb on the market in reality to force density into our city.
Well, you'll force density again if you go over that 10%.
Correct.
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
that's
that's why you would want to go more than 10 to
Yeah.
force density.
Yeah.
So that's kind of why I want to understand the mechanics of it, because right now we already have the ability, or developers have the ability without us doing anything.
Correct.
And no say in it.
Correct.
So if it penciled out at the higher density, they would just do it. So there's economic incentive there.
And Sam, you can speak to this. Are you getting density bonus applications now?
Only recently.
Only recently.
So the market's handling that then, because that means we are creating low or moderate income housing coming up. That's what you're saying then. It's
Yes, that it's being exercised at this time.
it's happening in the market without us doing anything already. What would be the effect of the 10, the 15, the 20? Do you think we would get more of those type of projects?
So that's sort of this chart here. I mean, projects could remain feasible. You know, somebody accessing the state density bonus, you could require up to 24%. However, you'd need to justify that to the state.
Over 15.
Correct.
Okay, so I guess my next question is on those projects where there is, well, explain the difference between inclusionary housing ordinance that we would do and then the state density bonuses. What are the terms of the covenants? How long does it have to remain affordable?
Oh, they're the same.
It's the same term. Like, what is the term? I couldn't
I
find
think they're 50 years. Is it 50 years?
55.
55.
45 and 55.
45 and 50.
45 and 55. Sorry.
So I'm trying to think from an economic standpoint of I'm purchasing a low income unit. Purchasing, I'm not talking about rental, purchasing. I can't get a market rate for that in the next 55 years. So me trying to pull myself out of an economic problem, I'm never able to get the appreciation that I would otherwise have if I purchased outside of this program. So you've actually just taken somebody that did everything they could to get a unit to buy a condo or whatever they're buying, and you're saying, sorry, you can't sell it for the market rate. You're gonna have to stay in that income bracket. That's what so you put the floor, but you've also put the ceiling on what someone can make. So San Gabriel, because of inflation, could go up really high. And it's not inflation in income, it's inflation in price. If you weren't in this program and you had purchased it outside of the density bonus, you would be able to say, sell your condo for $800,000, but now I can sell it for $470,000. I just lost $400,000. My family's legacy just lost that. So you're actually keeping people inside of this band. We always talk about the American dream, to be able to leave a legacy for your family, leave a legacy and create wealth. You're not allowing wealth creation. You're putting someone permanently in this band. They're never getting out of it. That's why I'm not a big fan of these long term. If the covenant was 10 years, I'd say, yeah, let's do it. If it was 15, but 55 years, that's my kids and my grandkids. They're stuck in this band. So it sounds great on paper, like we're creating affordable housing, but what you're really creating is a band of, there's certain people that are always going to be stuck here. They're never going to be able to work their way out of that because they've lost what everyone else gained in the market. So it's like saying you can make an investment in this stock. Everyone can earn unlimited gains except for these people because they paid this price for the stock, and they're never. So you're creating different classes of stock and by stock I mean stock of real estate. You just banded this. I'm not a big fan of that. I can just tell you. I really think there should be economic opportunity. The next part of that, I have another question. Is it really helpful to compare what other communities are doing? Because they have different income levels, they have different property acquisition prices. So to me, saying Pasadena does this, or Santa Monica does this, or Hoboken, New Jersey does this, does nothing for San Gabriel because they don't have our income levels, and so everything has to be a one-off. So we can't just say, oh, look at what Pasadena's doing so great. They have a higher income than we do. So their rentals, they support higher rentals. They support higher sales. So We can't just say one city's doing this, so we should do this. San Gabriel needs to make a decision for us. And I think that's why staff is recommending it's mathematics. If we're going to do this, the math has to pencil out. Otherwise, you're creating a situation where no one's going to develop. You just created a bunch of stagnation. And we're going to go backwards and not forwards by having this mechanics. It's strictly math mechanics. And if you try and out engineer the market, you will lose every time. That's what I see here. That's what the presentation has told me, that this is what will work on the high end. That's it. Okay. No questions right now.
Okay. So this report, it's want to clarify it's research for the feasible, right? For the feasible, it's how can we consider its inclusion or state bonus too, right? How for the future develop, not for the current develop, right? I know we have 19 projects, some it's a mixed use. They don't need to qualify. So if we, right now, today is not still study, right? For future, we have the decision, whatever percentage we have. So it's for the future develop. So your feasible, the report is also want us to think about how can we make a decision to what's the percentage for the inclusion or don't have it, right? So that's the purpose, right? Okay. All right. Thank you. So Chief City Clerk, do we have any public comment?
Yes, Mayor. First, we'll take the comments that were received by email, and then we'll have the speakers that are here in person.
Okay.
The first comment comes from Norma Davalos and reads as follows. No, absolutely no new apartments. Every place I go, there are newer apartments in every city. More people squeezed like sardines is asking for more congestion and crime. No one in the state level has a brain. We are to be autonomous. The state doesn't care about how it will affect the people. The next comment is from Peter Arizmendez, tenant in the city of San Gabriel, and reads as follows. Dear City Council, with so many tenants rent burdened and the growing homeless crisis, I plead for you to please draft an inclusionary housing ordinance that mandates at least 15% affordable housing in both rental and for sale units at low and very low income level. Thank you very much for considering and helping our struggling communities. The next comment is from Stephen Tan and reads as follows. Hello, I am a resident of the city of San Gabriel and have been one for over 20 years. I had the fortune of moving here years ago when rental prices were still within reach for working class families. The pace at which housing prices have climbed and with it rents in the city is quickly leading to outsized gentrification of our neighborhoods. While economic prosperity and capitalism are central tenets of our democracy, there is an unequivocal need to provide opportunities and diversity for our communities to flourish and share in our successes. The city should reject calls to pass any ordinance that lends itself to 0% affordable housing in rental units, particularly as families already here are being increasingly squeezed on all fronts financially. Profits are important, as are people, and they are not mutually exclusive, but rather laid out in different gradients. Our city has humble beginnings as the birthplace of the walk to what would become Los Angeles, and it would be a shame if we forgot the importance of building an inclusive and economically diverse community. Thank you. The next comment is from here Commissioner and San Gabriel resident Jorge Herrera Avila and reads as follows. It is important to recognize what affordable housing is not just about home ownership, but also about ensuring renters have access to safe, affordable, and decent housing. I strongly believe that developers should consider the needs of renters in San Gabriel and offer affordable housing options to them. We live in a time where many people may not be able to own their own homes in their lifetime, and it is essential that we make affordable housing accessible and reasonable for all. It is crucial that we work together as a community to find solutions that benefit everyone and create a more equitable society. I also want to emphasize that the notion of having 0% affordable housing for renters is not only concerning, but it is also outright bizarre. It is crucial that we recognize that renters in San Gabriel, and indeed in any city, also deserve access to safe, secure, and affordable housing. It is simply unacceptable to neglect the needs of renters and deny them the opportunity to live in decent, affordable homes. This not only affects the renters themselves, but it also has wider implications for the community as a whole, including the local economy, public health, and social well-being. We must work together to create policies that prioritize the needs of all residents, including those who rent. Only by doing so can we ensure that San Gabriel remains a vibrant and inclusive city where everyone has the opportunity to thrive. Thank you for your attention to this crucial issue. Our first speaker this evening is Michelle Branhog.
Good evening, Mayor, council members, and commissioners. Thank you for listening to my comment tonight. My name is Michelle Bernhag. I am a resident of San Gabriel, and I'm also a commissioner on the HERE Commission. I'm here to ask you to consider how we're going to commit to making affordable housing a priority for our city. You're being asked in this agenda item to recommend percentages for inclusionary housing. The consultant's report on economic feasibility recommends a 10% rate of affordable units for sale developments and 0% rate for rental developments. I would ask that the Council on Planning Commission consider higher rates for both for sale and rental developments, 15% for sale and 10% for rental. This inclusionary ordinance is one of the tools that the city has to help increase the number of affordable units in our city. And if you think about waiting till a later time to increase the housing ordinance, there's a lot of missed opportunity for how many affordable units can be made if you make the decision sooner than later. The consultant's presentation on the feasibility and profit margins for developers is an educated speculation on future projections, but the data that we have that Commissioner McMorris cited in the needs assessment and the housing element shows that, it's not projection that it's a known value that we need affordable housing in our city. And, those are real people with real struggles who cannot afford to live here. And, also have a hard time, understanding city politics and policy. Even for me, as somebody who's pretty educated, it's very difficult to wade through all of the information that's here and even, have the motivation to come and speak tonight. So I would just love it if you would consider, the equity and access in our city, as others have already spoken about, that having affordable housing, increases people's health and well-being. It increases their educational ability. The burden of housing insecurity can, lead to higher crime. All of these things we want our citizens to have the ability to, thrive. So thank you so much for listening to me tonight.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Chastity Jennings Nunez.
Good evening. I am Chastity Jennings Nunez. I am also a 20-year resident of San Gabriel. I own my home and a member of the HERE Commission. So I want to start with, when you met in September, there were a number of questions about affordable housing and how it's defined. And so I want to provide you with that information. So according to the Department of Housing and Urban Development, affordable housing is defined as housing on which the occupant is paying no more than 30% of their gross income for housing costs, including utilities. There was also a question about how we define low income, moderate income, et cetera. And those labels are based on the annual median income for a particular city. So the numbers that they're using from 2018, we have newer numbers, and the median income for San Gabriel is actually a little over $70,000, according to the census data. That's not the average income, that's the median income. So 50% make less, 50% make more. For low income, really anyone who's making up to 80% of that, so you could make $50,000 a year and still be considered low income in terms of housing. And moderate income are households that make up to $90,000 a year is considered moderate income. So when the suggestion is to have moderate income housing, we're still talking about a significant income. The idea of financial feasibility for developers is not a matter of projects operating at a loss. It is more of a matter of impacting the expected profits that the developers are allowed to rake in. Every slide said may as a word in terms of whether these projects would be feasible, as Councilmember Menchaca pointed out. So my question is, we still have this land that was designated near Del Mar as part of the San Gabriel Trench project that was supposed to be designated for affordable housing. And we also have a former elected official, Jason Poo, who is now the regional administrator for the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. And I think that he needs to be utilized to help connect the city with funds to develop this area for affordable housing. Finally, I just want to say for Councilmember Harrington, the fact that he would use language of inclusion and equity to justify the greed of developers is really enraging for me. And that he would then go on to say that we shouldn't follow the example of surrounding cities when a number of his initiatives last year came from surrounding cities and trying to follow their example is also, for me, the ultimate in hypocrisy. So I would like to strongly recommend, like others, that we have at least a 15% inclusionary rate for our rental properties, as well as an inclusionary rate for our for sale properties. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Sylvia Templer. I'd like to say thank you for listening to me too, and thank you for even considering an inclusionary ordinance. So I didn't know that it was something that you didn't have to do. I've kind of done a crash course since I've been involved with homeless people. And I found out during this week that I was one of the severely burdened renters of San Gabriel. So I'm recently retired, but I was a teacher. I'm actually bringing home the same amount of money that I made my last year of teaching. I don't feel burdened because I don't have little children. So my utilities, like yours, your gas has gone sky high. It doesn't matter if there's one person in the house or three people in the house or four people, if your your utilities are still there, regardless of I'm sorry, I'm going off script. I love San Gabriel. I moved back, I was here 1991. I paid $900 a month, 2 incomes. We paid $900 a month for rent in a huge apartment. I now am renting at 212 North Del Mar. I pay $2,300 a month. So there is a huge increase. And that's still low. I could not rent a house in Pasadena for that amount, or Monrovia, or Temple City. I think I lucked up with a really generous landlord, actually. But I'm the face of the severely burdened. I worked all my life. Mr. Herring, I'm going to cry. I didn't want to be emotional.
on a teacher income in California, it's very difficult to buy a house. I don't have that. That's not something that I think I'll ever do or be able to do. But I do wish that I have friends in San Gabriel who are young with children, and I would like them to have that dream. I would like them to have affordable rent so that they could save enough money for a down payment on an affordable unit to buy. I mean, I think home ownership, even without the idea that it's your nest egg, just owning a home is a wonderful thing, regardless if you're going to make a profit on it. I don't know that, that makes sense to me because where I have been economically, and like the last two speakers, I think the sooner you do this, the better. The sooner that you write an ordinance, I think you should include incentives. I think it should be at least 20% rental. I think you should plan for the future. I don't think you should just put for sale units right now and later you're going to reconsider it and add rentals. I think you should go ahead and write it in there now.
Thank you.
Put
Your time is up.
incentives for the developers. Okay. Incentivize.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Brian Brenhog.
Good evening, council members and commissioners. My name is Brian Brenhog, and I would like to express my thanks for this opportunity to address you. I live in the city of San Gabriel, and I'm speaking to you tonight in a personal capacity. My family and I are proud to call the city of San Gabriel our home. I wanted to express my support for affordable housing tonight. I have 2 school-age children, and over the past few years, I've noticed many of my children's classmates have been forced to leave the San Gabriel Valley and move east. I believe as council members, you are aware of the immensity of the affordable housing problem. It will take many different initiatives to counter the economic forces accelerating the housing prices beyond wage growth. I believe one answer to the lack of affordable housing is increasing the overall supply of housing, and I have been proud to observe the major developments within the city which can provide the supply. However, I believe we have all seen those forces of development pushing people out of the various communities where low rent can be found, and I don't want to see that happen in our city. I would encourage you tonight to push for a future in the city in which an economically diverse population can feel welcome and remain residents in our city. Thank you, council members and commissioners, for your time.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Allison Henry.
The glasses are relatively new. My apologies. My name is Allison Henry. I'm the co-founder of the San Gabriel Valley Tenants Alliance. I live in Pasadena, but I've worked with tenants here in San Gabriel. I'm here speaking on behalf of SGVTA in support of increasing the inclusionary numbers that we're talking about here. San Gabriel Valley Tenants Alliance was formed in 2020 to educate and create tenant support in the San Gabriel Valley. We'd like to see San Gabriel adopt a 20% minimum with at least 15% minimum for low and extremely low income households, 5% for moderate income residents, and this should include rentals. The Southern California Association of Governments, SCAG, data demonstrates the need for affordable housing for current residents, and this data is in your housing element. Commissioner McMorris cited it. You are a 55% renter majority city. You have a lower income population than the county. 14% of your residents are below the poverty level. Over half of the San Gabriel tenants spend more than half of their income on rent. This is unacceptable. So in thinking about this policy and what it is to achieve, these feasibility studies are just that, they're studies. We're in a historic crisis with housing. It's not exclusive to this city or even the region. If developers can't figure out how to make money and house people, then I'm wondering who we're doing business with as communities. This should be the push to help developers figure out something better, because you can't talk about 70,000 people on the streets of LA County as an externality. And that is how economists would articulate that. And that is flatly wrong. We're not using values, we're using worth, and they don't mean the same thing. So I just want to wrap up quickly and say your current residents would not be helped by the proposal. They would be helped by a higher amount of affordable housing for sale or for rent. And if you're not planning for who is in your data now, then who are you planning for? Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Jill Shook.
Good evening. I'm happy to be here with you. And I want to say thank you for all your good comments and questions. You asked some excellent questions tonight. And I want to ask you a quick question. I just want to know what your goal is. You know, is your goal truly to stop development, or is it to help those residents in your city? I think it's a very important question you need to answer. Your consultant is saying that if a developer chooses to take advantage of the density bonus law, that the rental housing would be indeed feasible, even at 24% set aside. That's right in the report he provided for you. That's really impressive. That's good news for your city, and that's good research. The consultant that you hired did a good job. We found that in Pasadena, where I live, that the consultant came up with very similar results when we were looking at our inclusionary. Actually, it showed that even at 25% set aside, it would still be between 10 to 12% return for developers. That's a good, fair return for developers. So when we showed our research to the Pasadena City Council, when they saw that even 25% would be feasible, they said, wow, we had no idea. And so when they actually saw that it would still be a fair return, they decided at 20%. Now, that may not be the right number for your city. Our city is not the same as your city, but one thing that is very much the same is that we have about the same number of renters, actually a few more, 64%. The other thing that's the same, that the majority of all the folks in our city that are serving our city, that are at all the stores that you go to, most of them are at the very low income level that are serving our city. And so that's the population I think you really need to target. And so when you look at this inclusionary opportunity, I'm going to tell you something that might be surprising. There's a developer after when we were still at 15% between 2001 up until 2019, there was a developer that approached me and he said, you know, Jill, I'm so glad you all were involved in helping to pass this inclusionary policy because I really didn't think I could make the numbers work. I had no idea that it would be feasible to include affordable units. And he says, but you all forced me to do the numbers. And I can't believe it. I'm actually ahead. I'm ahead by including not just the moderate or the low, but the very low income level. And the reason why they were ahead financially is because of the density bonus law.
Thank you.
And so what's happened with your situation is that you're leaving that out of the equation. The density bonus indeed is something you should be considering so that it indeed will be feasible as your consultant has described. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Cheryl Cabot.
Mayor, council members, and commissioners. It's very disturbing that the consultant recommended and staff approved. They also recommended 0% inclusionary housing in San Gabriel. I don't know anything about the consulting firm, and I don't know what San Gabriel staff recommended to be approved. But 0% is totally unacceptable. It should be nothing less than 15%. 20 to 25 would be even better. I've lived in San Gabriel for 23 years in the same apartment. I love where I live, and I know that 2/3 of the people living in our complex of 30 units, 2/3 of them have 2 to 3 generations. I don't mean little kids, I mean parents, adult children, and grandparents, because that's all they can afford. They're not huge apartments either, so we do have a need for that. I'm guessing, and I might be wrong, that all involved in issuing 0% live in houses or condos and not rental property. If so, you don't have to worry about being priced out of your rental apartment. I'm not worried about developers losing money. They won't lose any money if they have to comply with an inclusionary housing ordinance. They will just charge more for the subsidized units. And on my street, almost all the units were built in the 40s and 50s. It's all apartments. But in the last couple of years, there has been quite a bit of development, and it's all luxury condos and luxury apartments. Most of us living on that street aren't going to be able to afford that. If you went to the doctor for an exam because you were not feeling well and the doctor said you have cancer, you would ask, well, what do I do now? And the doctor said, nothing, 0. I'm pretty sure this would not be acceptable to you and you would want a second opinion. The housing shortage is a cancer. It has invaded every community and it's not going to fix itself or go away by denying its existence. I think the city of San Gabriel needs a second opinion on what is needed for inclusionary housing in San Gabriel. Saying we need 0 inclusionary housing or rental housing is a travesty and totally unacceptable. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Eric Chen.
Good evening, council members. Quick introduction about myself. I grew up in this city. Been coaching speech and debate for over 20 years. I'm on the City Here Commission. We're very active in our communities. For example, the most recent Monterey Park shooting incident. Been in contact with at least 30, 40 victims, assisting them. So I'm a very concerned member of our community and very involved with families, government, and business too. So I'm very familiar with business as a small business owner. So I understand, not just the progressive side, but the business side. I want to talk about the economic feasibility today. And, there's a Mark Twain saying that, there's lies, damn lies, and statistics. So we really have to be clear about what the statistics say. And I find it very interesting that, they said it's not economically feasible. Well, I mean, it's like others have spoken, the new condos and apartments, they're not going to be market value the average. Okay, for example, at 88 South Garfield, the studio apartment, I just looked it up, $3,300, 3-bedroom, $7,700. Right. So when we look at these new projects, they're not going to be quote average market value. Right. So we really have to look at that, and we also not even taking into account, for example, the housing choice vouchers from the housing authority that subsidizes the rental income if you're only paying 30%, and then the federal, the government subsidizes the 70, the rest. So there's so many factors. So I mean, it's kind of like, what do you do with the statistics? Are you really looking at the real numbers? And as Councilmember Wu pointed out, like square footage. So whatever we can make the numbers show whatever we want it to show, right? And even like in Alhambra and Claremont. But I would want to address also Councilmember Harrington, what some of the things you said. You said that you don't want people to be permanently capped. Well, if people can't even buy a house, they're already permanently capped, right? So right? The status quo, that's what it is. You're permanently capped. You can't buy it. So, even if we had, 55 years, so after 55 years, then you can sell at a market value. And then you also mentioned that, we gotta look at city of San Gabriel, not other cities. And we just had other stats saying, yes, in the city of San Gabriel, over 50% of the people spend over 50% of their income on housing. So looks like in our city, we need local income housing. But taking your words, we really need more low income housing than maybe we need 25%. I don't know. And finally, I just want to address the issue that we need social engineering. Social engineering is the problem. Actually, the fact that there's no social engineering, that's why house prices are out of control, right? When we don't have social engineering, we have unaffordable housing.
Thank you. Your time is up.
And so my last sentence is that we're a city with a mission, and I hope that we have a mission to create profitable businesses and access to affordable housing. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, that concludes the speakers.
Okay, thank you. So before we discussion, so I just said I'll try because the timing. Okay.
Okay. Could I ask for a health break?
Okay. All right. Okay. Go ahead.
But that is maybe people don't know what.
We can go to the restaurant. Okay. And 10 minutes? Is it okay? Oh, is enough? 10 minutes. Is it okay? So we come back 8:43. Okay. That lot, right?
Put your mic up to it.
Give it back.
There they go.
There it is.
That's it. That one.
Wow. That's your best one of the year, Tom.
Okay, all right, okay, thank you. So we reassessed today the meeting. And so before discussions, because the time matter, try, but this good topic, we need a more fully discussion, but I hope everybody just keep like, if your own opinion or your discussion within like 5 minutes, hope no more than 5 minutes, then we turn around for the second person. Is it okay? If no questions, so we also I think all the council member want to listen to your commissioner first. So maybe you start from the commissioner who will be like in our discussion, who will be like to start it.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, let's just take this for a few minutes and to reiterate what you were saying, if we can keep it light and little short. So, and we're going to have time to look at this again. So this is our first blush with it. Jerry, you want to jump in on this and give us your thoughts?
Sure. First, I want to thank everybody for coming and expressing their opinions and for what clearly is a love of our community. That's reassuring to hear so many people love San Gabriel so much. This is certainly a challenging situation. It makes all sorts of sense to have more affordable units than we have today, which is, anyway. And when we have projects along San Gabriel Boulevard that are mixed use, that are pretty big, some of them are pretty big size. Putting an inclusionary housing requirement and something like that, where it's either units or an lieu fee. I think it's something that clearly the community thinks we need to do that on all kinds of housing, and I think there's certainly value to continuing to study it as the chair says, we'll see it again, and that's good. I think staff did a thorough job. I think they presented different options, and it's really a matter of what we in the community think is important in the way we go forward with trying to encourage future housing, a variety of future housing in this, because as was mentioned, 3,000 units, as crazy as that is what the state said we got to do. So anyway, it's going to be a challenging one that I think is going to be worthwhile for the benefit of the community, future of the community.
Thanks, Jared. Matt, you want to chime in?
Yes. This type of regulation of 10% does set a floor, and even at 15% or whatever 20%, it does set a floor. It doesn't set a ceiling for the density bonus. And so if there's an incentive there, it's there with or without the minimum floor requirement. And to reiterate what John said, I think if you have a property that you purchase and it has a limited resale value, you have no incentive to maintain the property over 55 years. And I think a lot of buyers are going to be totally unaware that there's a cap on what this property is worth, and you can't, you've got your money all tied up. for 55 years. So that you can't, if some family emergency happens or whatever, you sell it, you can't get that money out, or especially as it depreciates over time. So it doesn't make a lot of sense to have this cap on a sales basis. However, the real problems in the rental area, because we've got 60% renters, and I think we should focus on the rental side and how to get developers in here that are going to build rental properties. Right now, we're getting, you say $2 a square foot for rental, and he says it makes only sense at $3.50 a square foot. But if we raise rents to $3.50 a square foot, that's not affordable rent. If they're not affordable now at $2 a square foot, how are they going to be affordable at $3.50 a square foot? That will be like a dog chasing its tail. Constantly, rents have to go up in order to generate affordable housing. It's almost contradictory. So while this stuff is well intentioned, I don't think it's going to achieve its goal. We need to get some kind of subsidy or tax credit or something that's going to provide an incentive for a developer to come in and build 3,000 rental units. And if there's more supply, then the cost will come down and it'll be more affordable for everybody. But there has to be some kind of pro forma to create an incentive for a developer to come in here. Nobody, although people have all identified the need, nobody has a real plan, a real pro forma to develop a piece of property for X dollars a square foot and then rent it for X dollars a square foot. That's what's needed, not some kind of 10% IHO. I don't think that's going to change anything.
Okay. I failed to have an opportunity, but our newest commissioner, Hang Lee, if you'd like to share any thoughts, now'd be the time to do it.
Sure. So I think we have a real problem, real crisis of housing crisis that we are facing. But it is a unique, right? We live in San Gabriel. We don't live in Los Angeles. We don't live in Pasadena. We don't live in Santa Monica. But we have, the people here are for the love of the city. We are here because we love our city. We have a unique culture. We have a unique characters that we would like to keep, right? So knowing that there is a crisis, right? Knowing that we have a strong love, strong affection for our country, we need to have a balance. So setting something as a floor, as a ceiling, would it save? Would it solve the problems? Maybe, right? But the economists say that there is a supply and demand law, right? If we have enough supplies, the price is going to adjust by itself, right? So how are we going to give an incentive to the developer to come in to our city and then develop multi-units, the commercial business? That is what we have to think. It's not about 10%, it's not about 15%, or it's not about 24%. But is it gonna help the people who are in problem paying the rent? Yes, it's definitely gonna help. But what we have to do is a balance, right? It's not 24%, it's not 10%, but for me is something low, and then something that would keep a characteristic of our city, and then solving the future problems. I don't think we have a problem at this point in our country, in our city, but it is a real problem that we are facing, and then it's going to have a problem in our city in the future. So I think we should make a step forward and then set that numbers low enough and then keeping the characteristic of the city. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, man. And welcome.
Thank you.
Sean,
Yeah,
do you have anything you want to add?
yeah. Thank you, everyone, for your comments. All of the people in the audience, commissioners and city council members. So I'm hearing a lot of how we're going to take care of the developers. I think this is a values question. I mean, you can laugh, Commissioner Crutman, but you know, this is a values. This is a well, the density bonus. That's what the density bonus does. It pencils out. It showed it in the analysis. It incentivizes them to do it. They're not going to do it unless we tell them that you have to build these units, but they get incentivized and they get compensated by building more market rate units. That's what the analysis said. They're not going to do it on their own. We have to do it. We have a real problem. Are we so unique as a city? That's so unique than the other 170 cities in California, which is 1/3 of the cities, that we can't make it work with an inclusionary housing ordinance. 170 cities in this state have inclusionary housing ordinances. Are we going to do nothing, or are we going to pass window dressing so that we say we tried and we're not actually going to create any affordable and low-income housing? This is about our neighbors, our friends. I don't know how many people up here rent or in low income. That's why I think, yes, I do. I live.
Makes sense for a developer.
Okay.
Excuse me.
So
I wish I had the luxury
just
to
let Sean finish.
I wish I had the luxury to debate whether 1.3 million in profit is reasonable versus 1.7 million, which is what we're talking about here. I'm not saying they don't deserve to make a profit. They will make a profit with the density bonus. Sitting here and saying we don't need to do anything and to imply that, oh, if you can't afford a house at market rate now, tough luck, you know, because I much rather would prefer to own, to buy an affordable house, okay, and have it locked in. I can make some savings, pay off that house, sell it again for a lower rate, and take what I saved and go buy a real house. But if I can't even do that, I never get to buy a house. Okay, so this is what we're talking about here. And I'm sorry, but I can't accept, if we're going to sit here and say we've got an extreme problem in our housing element with very low and low income, more than anyone else in the area, pretty much, but yet, oh, the market will fix itself. Even if the market fixes itself, we can't wait for 30 years. What about my neighbor with 3 kids, you know, a single mom, when she can't afford to rent? What about them? We listen to people come up here. They're not going to accept that. Why should we? And I'll just say this. If we don't do way more than what is being recommended in this you know, analysis, we got to own it as a city. We got to own it and say that's who we are. Okay? So just, I want everyone to think about that. We can do something. We need to. We've been putting it off for so long. It's time. I'm you know, how many of us here again are in the situations of the people who came up? It's extremely cost burden, yet we're telling them you're wrong. I can't accept that. And I have a lot of recommendations about what should be in an ordinance, and I'm happy to suggest them, and I can give the justifications for why we need them. But I'll stop for now.
Okay. Thanks, Sean. We're going to have plenty of time to talk about this, so let's look forward. Fang, I liked your point. We've got to find a balance. It's an old community. You know, you start talking about the age of the units, and you're looking at, you know, hell, my house was born in 20, or built in the 20s. So there's been a lot of development, you know, through the years. It's an infill city, so you're not going to see a lot of large scale development, but you will in the areas that need it. You know, the transportation corridors, some of those places where you can take some benefits. But it's the balance. You need to find the balance. You know, if you set the bar too high, they're not going to build it. They're not going to come. If you set the bar too low, then you're not helping the people who need to be helped. So that's why we're here. We're going to find the balance.
Thank you. So our council term, okay, who would be like to start? So, okay, Councilmember Minchuk.
Well, okay, fine. I'll start. So I think for me, I can narrow it down to two things, access and values. If we don't allow any type of affordable housing, I reject the idea that the market is going to fix itself and eventually maybe somebody will have access to it. I mean, we need to do something now. I've always believed in social diversity. I also believe in economic diversity. And we need housing programs. We need to be involved at some level. We've had families and individuals come up today and talk about how it's impacted them or their neighbors. We've seen other cities have done it. We can do it too. I still believe we're not that unique. Our city's unique, but the troubles that we're having, whether it's the homeless count, whether it's the economic burdens that renting in particular is experiencing, it's happening here too. We're no different. I think San Gabriel needs to do their part too. We talked about the fact we have no affordable housing. We have one development that we want to do, but the grants are competitive. We haven't been able to build enough of the impact fees. There's not enough there. So I don't know when that's going to take place. So this is our one and only opportunity to do something meaningful, not just talk about it, but again, it's about our values and the vision we have of quality of life in San Gabriel. The recommendations, for me, they were flawed just because it's not taking into account so many other, the situation in general, the assumptions, the circumstances. There was just so much that was lacking from my perspective. But I do agree on balance. I believe that we need to find a balance, but doing nothing is not acceptable. We need to do something to give people access because they're counting on us. I mean, this is what we do as council members. We're trying to be the voice of all, the voice of especially the most vulnerable because they're not here today talking about the fact that, can't afford childcare, that the housing, even at the moderate levels, are so high. But I don't want to forget also the developers. I do want to bring in developers. I want them, developers are not bad. They need to make a buck. They need to pencil things out. But I think we can try to find, I don't think this is the only study session we should be having. There needs to be other study sessions, but I like to find, some kind of incentives or concessions that we can make so we can help developers make a profit. What that profit is, whether it's 1.5 or 2.1, is a different discussion, but let's be innovative. We've talked about the density bonus. We talked about CEQA. We talked about impact fees. Maybe there's other ways. But again, we're down to balance, but we're also down to access. So it's balance and access. I'd like to also propose that if we do an inclusionary housing ordinance, that we do reevaluate it because we have something called RENA that we can't ignore anymore. As a council, we kept ignoring it. We haven't been able to meet our numbers, but it's gotten progressively worse and there will be consequences. I would like to reevaluate it maybe in a couple years, maybe in 3 years, just to see how close we are to meeting the mandates. We appealed and it's still at 3,000, which I think is completely outrageous, but those are the cards that we've been given. I like to see a 15% minimum for both rental and for sale properties at the low and very low incomes. But again, finding that balance with our developers, what is going to work. And I think together we can do that. But, we got to give people access because at this point, there's no access to our rentals, especially as our older stock is being renovated. Even the senior housing, the senior development, what do we call them? And they have a new word for it. In my days, there were I hate to talk about that, but anyway, it's where you put seniors to have independent living. I think that's what they call it now, independent living. Even those, the one that's being proposed, they're looking at $5,000 a month for seniors. And don't know a lot of seniors who can afford $5,000 a month. It's got a bar, it's got a swimming pool, but still, I mean, this is what we're looking at. We used to have independent living facility there, and it was substantially less for those seniors. And so, we need to do something. And it's seniors also. If you look at the stats, I don't think it's been mentioned, but they're the fastest growing age group that are becoming homeless. They're unhoused. They don't have the monies to for their older years, their golden years. So I am thinking a lot about our seniors. I'm thinking about the families. If we don't have families, we don't have young children in our community. My God, the impact. I mean, not only on schools, but just, what does that mean as a city that we can't bring in families with young children to the next generation. So, anyway, hopefully, let's see. Affordable housing units is the bottom line. Balance, 15% rental and for sale, low and very low income levels, and identifying some type of incentives and concessions for whatever we do bring to the Planning Commission, and to revisit and see where we're at. Those are my thoughts.
Thank you. What's next? Councilmember Chen.
Yeah, I'm looking. Hearing the presentation and looking at the recommendations, I think it's a reasonable place to start. I'm okay with this, but I also agree with Commissioner Kraplin that ultimately the math has to work. Now, I'm an accountant by profession, and that's the numbers always have to work out in the end. So yeah, I'm all right with the current recommendation, and we'll see. We'll start there, see how it goes. But yeah, ultimately the numbers have to make sense for the developers to have the incentive to develop in our neighborhood. So, thank you.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Harrington.
Thank you, Mayor. There's a lot more here than you can say in 5 minutes, I think, but I'll try and condense it down. Right now in economics, there's the seen and there's the unseen. We keep talking about the seen. No one's talking about the unseen effects of legislation. And that's what I think about because I do investments for a living. So, I mean, that's what I do. I can tell you money is fungible. The amount of money it takes to build one of these that a developer has to risk, there has to be an incentive on the return. When you go to this report, there's a reason that an economist or an accountant can't recommend these rates, because if I'm going to invest, let's say $20 or $10 million, I could easily put that money passively on an investment and make 10% with nearly zero risk. If I want to take an active risk, I should be rewarded for that active risk. So I can just tell you, we can say developers are greedy or not greedy or whatever you want to say. If you have money and you want to help your community, are you going to do it out of the kindness of your heart and take a 50% loss on the revenue you could have made? No, you're going to just put it passively and get rid of the headache of doing development. There's a reason it costs money to develop. It is a headache to do, but the returns have to justify that. I can stick $10 million in private equity and make 10% all day long, passively. So I better make 15 or 17% by increasing risk and increasing that. That when we say we're driving developers away and it doesn't pencil out, that's what that means. So we can't just, it's not esoteric, it's a real thing. We set this high bar and people don't bring their money to San Gabriel. Yes, there's 100 and whatever other cities that have inclusionary housing, which means there's 360 that don't, because there's 480 cities in California. That means some cities think it makes sense. Some cities don't think it makes sense. For us, we have to decide, do we want to attract people or will we attract people at a 4.6% return on their investment? That's what that's what these numbers say. No one has said here these numbers are wrong. Well, you said it, but you haven't said why. Because when I look through them, there's is the land acquisition wrong? Is the construction cost wrong? Is the amount they're going to receive in rent wrong? So you have to find the error. Say what you can't just say the numbers are wrong. You go through here and it has hard costs. The land will cost you X amount per square foot. That's something verifiable. So if we say there's a mistake here and our consultant has made a mistake, that's one thing. To say you don't agree with the numbers or just generally say they're wrong, the numbers are here, and it says, let's go to table A14 for rental property. That's on, you can see it, page 66. The reason it's unlikely on all three is because it's a 4.76, 4.72, and 4.7% yield, respectively. That's not a great rate of return. So if we do this, we have to keep that in mind. The unseen cost here is going to be no units at all created, market or affordable or very low income. So do we want to take that risk of setting it all the way up to 20, whatever at the beginning, and all of a sudden, gee, 2 years later, we should have created on average, let's say 300 units a year through whatever, I forget exactly what our average is, something like that. Some years we get 600, some years we get 100, but it's around 350 every year of the number of units we're building. Then the next 2 years we get 20 units and they're all single families and there's no high density at all. Are we going to, gee, why is this happening? And then we got 2 years that we've just lost out on any units at all. Much less, and that increases market on everyone. We don't have rent control. We're not a big enough city to do that. We would drive people right out. So there's a lot of tools in the toolbox. This is one of them. And you can't just take this tool and try and solve all your problems with it. It's not going to solve affordable housing. Not one person rent is going to be lower that's existing in this city if we do this. Future rents may be lower for some people, but that also means correspondingly that the person making this investment, i.e. the developer, has to make that money up somewhere else, which is actually creating a higher cost on the I'll call them non-subsidized units, which that's when we're saying something pencils out. You're actually going to increase the market rate in order to make the lower affordable rates. That's the only way the balance sheet works. It's a zero-sum game. The only thing that can give is the rate of return. And if that rate of return drops too low, you get zero development. And that's why we have to be very mindful of this. I don't think our consultant made a mistake. I read all of these tables. And in fact, if anything, I think they're optimistic because it's based on a very low interest rate that was not achievable right now. It was 2.86%, which I'm like, man, I'll develop all day long at 2.86% on my money. I'm looking at 7% right now on some of these commercial loans. So we have to be realistic. The math doesn't lie. Show me. So if the council can show me where these numbers are wrong, I can agree. Let's go above 10. Let's go 15. It doesn't, it's not here. So we can't just say it's greedy developers. We can't just say we have to keep rents low because the city doesn't control rents. They're going to be what they're going to be. We can only control future costs of a very small number. If we built all 3,000 and we achieved our 10%, that's 300. So we've solved it for 300 people out of 45,000. So I like to think of the big picture that we need to do something. I'm not saying don't do anything. And I think the recommendation is the first step. See where that takes us. Thank you, Vice Mayor. Councilmember Wu.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, the reason I pull out those data, actually not just today, but today I have pulled out the last data because I want to make sure the numbers are accurate. And those are the daily numbers that we are dealing with. And obviously, the affordable housing program that I would say earlier is better because I remember that from a time that when I know that some investor invested property in the city of San Gabriel, that time 2,000 square feet. In 1986, it was only $186,000. And now the price has gone up to $700,000. I totally understand that this is about inflation and this is about, the cost of living, everything. And that's why I rather to bring out the number, not just the square footage, but how much per square foot for everyone who wants to stay in this city, that as a renter or as a homeowner. And we have to make sure that, cheaper is a part of affordable elements, but it's not equal to affordable. So cheaper is not always equal to affordable. And we need to adopt a program, but we have to look at the number. I mean, even we have discounted for 25% for people that is with a very low income or even no income. It's still not affordable. But we are targeting those people who still in needs and who is working, who is paying tax, who is, struggling with living because the living cost is too high. We are trying to help those, but we cannot really rescue every single of the people. I mean, we try, but I doubt if we have the capacity to make some policy that will be affordable housing to all people, no matter that how low they can get income, for their daily life. Because except the cost of house living, they still have a lot of things to spend: the kids' education, gas, electricity, utilities, property tax. So I would say, so we should really targeting on those people. It's more realistic that they are, if we adopt a program, they will be benefited. And how many people and what is the population for those people? We should really see some numbers that is more achievable. And I agree that if a builder developer, I mean, we really do not use greedy to describe that, but there's make no sense for them to make no profit at all and just be a charity heart in helping us to develop the whole projects and just make not, it doesn't really make a business sense, be honest to everyone. So we should not really kill the goose that lay the golden eggs, but we should really find out the balanced number, which is we call the true affordable numbers. And so I agree with Councilmember Menchaca. We should really have more, uh, session that we can just get for details, because now we have the numbers about what is the moderate income and what is possible cost to the builder. But actually, this is not enough yet. We just have a very initial, stage to adopt the program. But I think it's earlier is better, because I don't know how the price market will goes in further down the line. It could be more expensive in the future. And actually, from a history, the number we will never go back to 1986. I hope it won't. So that's why I said we really want to set up a good policy, that the policy is really enforceable. It's not something that we are giving a good name, but we cannot help anyone else. Then the developer complains, the people who needs the housing still complains, and we still can go nowhere. I mean, this is something I really want to achieve, an enforceable affordable housing fund. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Wu. So, my turn. Okay. So yeah, yeah. This is really right now. It's a reality for our community, not just for the city of San Gabriel. It's even whole United States, not just for the California too. So a lot of things I think we have to first of all we to discuss is it's right now the local control, right? Our city, but these things I don't think our city can plan that. That's at least the state should be do something too. We have to have some voice. Go to the state legislature, let them find out for us. So our small city, if you're talking about market value, small city you have to say that, right? If you sell the house, it's whole state things happen. How to balance maybe some dis- district or some city it's a price higher, some city is lower, but it's a whole state. If we are very small pool, it's hard to control like a market rate, right? So that's a reality things too. So that's but right now the reality, because state mandatory for us, we needed to do something, right? So we should be balanced. Okay. Uh, I have, look, it's okay for the for rental things. I hear some, I don't know, it's a city of Los Angeles or the county of Los Angeles. They have some program to assistant to the low income assistant. So maybe I think, I don't know how to execute. They maybe like a renter pay something, and their city or county just pay full amount. For example, they pay the landlord like maybe $2,000, but the tenant just 1,500, so something like that. Section 8, Section 8, yeah. So that's, I think maybe we should be also try help the rental too, to bring this kind of the resource, So that's the other thing. But for the city, we should be need to think about how to balance currently reality. So we need to for my also support the inclusive. Also like for the state dentist also, for my understanding, for the developer, if they qualify, they still have the incentive. It's because they can build more unit, and they also can reduce the parking space. That's the result. So we also need to think about it. If they have more unit and then reduce the parking space, it's really where our city, our community need to think about it too. So a lot of things need to think about it to try to do the more study to get the more accurate data, see what's the percentage for us. It's really good for us. But I don't think that if you get some or 10%, 15%, 25%, whatever the percentage, nobody know it's really can execute, right? Really like help the developer really coming to develop in our city, right? So no matter what decision, so we still need to review it. So for the future, for the consultant companies, they suggested 2 years. For me, also maybe we can think about 2 years, but we can review it every year to see what's going on. It's really attractive for the developer to come in, because if a developer does not come in with even with set up guideline, it's not really executable, right? So how we can find the more accurate number for us, we can execute for our future to help our community. I know that I really say that if you currently, if you're like the graduate student that come out, it's still if you're single or you're couple, it's really hard to affordable in our city too. They're for their income level. So that's the things like one thing we have the voice. I think all the voice coming to our city, but I hope this all the voice also go to the state or county, let them know to help, because they have the more resource compared with our city too. So second, like our city also, I want to do something to help like affordable housing, the affordable rent too, to help but how to combine all the resource together to bring together, like Section A, maybe one of the we can suggest to help, not just like a percentage. We can set up some percentage for rental, but also bring the more resource to help our community. So but time also is very important too. So if we do the restudy, like based on the council member Manchanka or Vice Mayor Harrington. So I just want to ask in staff. So probably if the more detail, like based on currently today the council member or commissioner asking question. So how long you can have the more detailed report for us we can discuss. So we don't I hope not too long because it's an urgent matter. Yeah.
Yes, Mayor and members of the Council and Planning Commission. In order to expand the analysis, staff will also have to review the funding that has been funded by state grants for this program. This is this is one of the housing programs that was a part of the comprehensive housing project, including the housing element, the CEQA that went along with it, the accessory dwelling unit guidebook. So a lot of other efforts and documentations that have gone into housing for the city within the last 2 years. And we're at the tail end. These last two items, the inclusionary ordinance, as well as the update of the density bonus ordinance. However, to expand more on the analysis, we would have to scope that out and we would have to evaluate the funding that will be needed for that.
So probably still take how many, 2 months, 3 months?
So to just walk it through, we would have to bring back another agreement with the consultant, disclose the amount that it would take to expand that analysis, draft the analysis, bring it back to another study session, get direction to draft the ordinances, and through Planning Commission and City Council. So a few months.
A few months. Okay. So, okay. Is there any commissioner have additional comments? And then later on, council member too. Okay. Commission.
I just want to say that in this analysis, even though I don't agree with everything in there, it does pencil out. If you look with the density bonus, I'm not sure why we keep ignoring the density bonus. And why wouldn't a developer use the density bonus if we're saying you have to build 15% affordable? They would use it. And even you look at the data here on these charts, if it's a 100% market rate in a mixed use commercial for low income feasibility, if it's just 100% market rate, the study shows they'll make 17% profit. If they do 10% affordable, they will make 19% profit. If they do 24% affordable, they will make 18.3%. Similar for some of the rental here in the mixed use area. So they're making a profit. They're actually making more profit than if they do 100% market rate because of the density bonus. The density bonus is making it pencil out. So I'm just saying that I just bring that up because we do have the numbers and we can make it work by what's here. I just think what's recommended is not taking that into account. And that's why we need to. So plus we can offer more incentives like other cities do on top of the density bonus. There's a bunch of fees we have for the application process on the front end. We can reduce those fees. We can give them more incentives to make it pencil out even more. So the developer is going to be taken care of. And I think the data shows that. We can make the affordable, they can make a decent profit. And I think that's what the data shows. So I'll stop there.
Thank you.
I just have a comments and then a couple of requests to staff. First thing that the comments is like, don't forget about the characteristic of the city that we love. I choose to live in San Gabriel because what it is about the San Gabriel, right? So the characteristic is very important, right? If we talk about the density bonus, if I understand clearly from the consultant, what it does is the bonus is like the like the floor area going to be wider, the height is going to be adjusted, and then all these things and the parking allowance is going to be impacted. So all these things is gonna impact or change what's the city that we love, right? So if you bring in a density, it sounds good. However, it has a negative impact on the city we love. Okay, so I also want to request the staff that can you do a study based on like the numbers, let's say 12% for sale, and if you like 9% for affordability, right? And then a low income for like 3%. What is it? How is that analysis going to come out to be? Right? Something like different numbers to play around with. Right? So that's what I want to see.
Thank you.
There's a Latin saying, I think it's something like the guilty party is the person who's not there, right? The person who's not at the meeting. There is no developer here. And everyone is accusing them of greed and other ad hominem assaults. I would recommend that staff actually get in touch with some developers that do apartment buildings and find out what they would need to build 3,000 units or whatever, so that because they will know how to do a pro forma. They will be able to figure out what the real interest rate is. I mean, interest rate for borrowing is 7-8%, not 2% or anything like that. And construction costs went up 24% in the last 2 years. So that wipes out your 18% profit immediately. Developers have a lot at risk. It takes them 4 years to develop a project, and their money is at risk that whole time. In 2008, a bunch of them got wiped out. So there's nothing that we can do to legislate their profitability. What we can do, though, is meet with them, meet with the renting community as well, and try to find something common ground where they can both, prosper. Right?
Thank you. Okay. Is there any council member?
I think we're ready to move on.
Okay. Okay. All right. So,
I was just going to say that, I did say, developers aren't evil. And I too wanted to ask that we bring the developers, the ones that we're working with. I mean, there's 19 projects. We don't have to bring every 19 of them, but find out, because again, balance, that's something I've emphasized. There are ways to make it pencil out and still give our residents access to housing that need it. So I'm not here to say this, don't do nothing. I think, we need to take the lead. We need to be innovative. So I would ask staff to speak to some of our developers. There's some big projects that have not done anything. So there's a reason it hasn't moved. Find out why. And find out what is it going to take? What kind of concessions? What kind of incentives? We've talked about some of them here already. But we do need to move forward with this. I think I've been waiting for 4 years now. First, it was the housing element, and then it was, COVID delayed everything. So we do need to move forward with this. And it appears to me that we do have at least a majority that wants to do something. Contrary to the recommendation, but we do need more data. Anyway, so.
Thank you. So yeah, we need conclusion is we need more data to make a decision. But is there any commission lead say, okay, so we already have the current recommendations 10 and none, right? So can you do some study, like I think some public comments is to say 15. So we can 15 do the study, see what's the result. Maybe also make 10 or 12, look at some option. So get some our commissioner and then the council have a more detailed the idea. And also it's very important for the who qualify, who is the moderate, who is the lower,
that way we need a more accurate data, Yeah.
Mr. Mayor, at the risk of being unresponsive to council's request, I'm concerned that we're going to disappoint you again if we go down this road. And the reason I'm concerned is I think the numbers are in the report. I mean, we can come up with the exact affordability level or profitability level at those scenarios. But what it's still going to show is that without a density bonus, nothing works for rental units, and anything lower than 10% for the for sale units works, but anything above 10% would require density bonuses. And density bonuses are great and they're available for folks. And so I'm not saying that that's a bad thing. I'm just saying that it's not going to change the analysis. It's going to be somewhere in between the numbers that you see here. It's not going to the numbers that you're asking us to run or you're considering are not going to change the end result, the profitability determination. We have talked to developers, but I would be happy to go back and ask some more specific questions on developers on what they suggest and bring back those suggestions when we bring it back to council and the commission. That I think is a great example. We met last week with a developer that's done 2 projects in the city, and I don't think anybody would be surprised to know that they would not like an inclusionary housing ordinance because it makes it a little more difficult. But I also know developers that would be very honest, and we may not bring them here because they may not want to say this, in public, but they would be very honest about what would be doable and what would not be doable. And I think that's probably more productive than coming back with a contract to rerun numbers that we think we're going to probably end up somewhere on the scale of what we already have. At this point, I think what we have before, I'm sorry. No, go. At this point, I think what we have before us is a policy discussion, a policy decision. We can justify anything upwards of up to 15% from a policy standpoint, and we can come back and see if that works. A couple of years later, the numbers without density bonuses show that's not going to pencil out. So it really is up to the appetite of the council and the commission. And I think Commissioner Lee, what his comments on that we're going to have to accept a different San Gabriel, and I leave it up to you all to decide whether that's good or bad. The projects that come with density bonuses are bigger than what our codes currently allow and come with less parking. So those are those impacts that you all hear about from your constituents, and whether the trade-off for affordable housing is a fair one. I leave that's a policy decision for the 5 of the planning commissioners and eventually the 5 council members. So if I can wrap that up, what I would suggest is that staff goes back and talks to a few developers. Our consultant has heard all of your discussion as well, and we can work with him. There needs to be some adjustments to the assumptions based on how old the data is. And old in our world right now might be a couple of months because of the way interest rates are changing. And we can represent the numbers or rerun them to make sure they're still accurate, and then come back with that information.
So my question real quickly is process. Does this go next step to a staff report? Where do we go from here?
That is totally up to the commission and the council. From a process standpoint of how it will go through would be, yes, a staff report. We would tie that all up. We can put it on websites early, so that if folks have questions or comments about the analysis, that they can ask those questions in advance and we can tweak things if need be.
Okay.
And then
that would maybe a little more input from the development side.
Absolutely.
Mark, I'm sorry.
Yes.
So when you speak to the developers, I would suggest that you give them like the percentages. If we would do, an IHO at 10%, what do you need? What would make it work? Or if it's at 15%, what would make it work? Because the density bonus was the big issue here, that it just seemed to have been ignored. But with the density bonus, even though I agree with the commissioner, because it will make some changes, but we still have control over that because we have the design review committee. We can set the standards of these larger projects and still make it San Gabriel. I mean, it's not like they just make bigger projects and there's nothing, no control on our side. We do dictate the standards. So I just wanted to clarify that. Isn't that correct?
Those projects will be the best looking projects in the area. I guarantee we have a great commission and a design review commission. As you've said, they will look like the other projects that are in the area, but they will have more floors to them. They will have less parking, and so they will not be the same as those other projects. And we don't have control over that because once you ask or receive those density bonuses, it takes it out of the city's hands on what those concessions are. So they could be closer to the street, they could be taller, they could have less open space. There are, I think, a list of like 10 menu items that they can choose from reductions for. It will still be San Gabriel projects from the outside, but not totally within our control on how to guide that development. And I also remembered as you were talking, you wanted to know what, for example, is stalling some of those projects that have been vacant for several years. I can tell you this because they're going through the process again, but the Arroyo Village project is a great example. That was one that was approved back in 2005, if I remember right. And then they came back through the commission and the council in 2015 or 16. Tell me how wrong I am, Sam, please. But ultimately, they're not able to build that as to what was reapproved. And I think it was actually more recent than that. But whatever that date was, that was within, my 5 years here. So it's fairly recent. And they're still not able to build that. And so they're coming back and proposing 30 some odd more units than what they already have and reducing the commercial square footage in order to make that project pencil out. So we are seeing the effects of the market and the construction costs, as Commissioner Kratman mentioned, and the real world. So that's why those projects are stalling.
And Mayor, if you may,
Okay.
I was going to hold my tongue, but sometimes I've been on the council a long time now. I've seen these projects get proposed and I've seen them die on the vine. And a lot of times it's market timing. It's what the city's able to do for the developer, what type of incentives we can give. This is actually tying our hands, not giving us more tools. The tool is very focused to one thing, but it's not giving us more options. It's giving us less options. If we just had density bonuses without requiring it, and we give more incentive and less requirements, to me, that's a better way to do it. So you shouldn't say every single development must have this. But what you do is give maybe even a better incentive than that and say, hey, if you do this, you get more density in these certain areas. But keep in mind that our space is limited to 4 square miles. We only have a certain number of projects where this would even work. The only thing we have to offer is height. What we can't offer in height is we don't have a ladder truck. Always keep that in mind. After 3 stories, every fireman in this city will tell you no more rescue until someone else comes. Remember that. I've been harping on that for 10 years. Until we have a hook and ladder, you shouldn't go above 3 stories. No matter what, how affordable it gets on the 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th story, it's not safe. Not in this city until we have a hook and ladder. It's just a reality. I don't want to give people a nice, affordable place where it's dangerous to live.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. So that's why I think maybe for example, maybe we can study based on the discussion currently discussed 10% or 50%. What's the disadvantage for the community or disadvantage for the developer? So or advantage too. So we can do the comparison. So actually, why I asking this kind of report? So we are doing almost like a risk analysis too, right? To see what's the best for our community. So if we have some more accurate data, based on your current suggestion, and the 10% or 15%, maybe we just narrow down these two additional options, so we can bring these data. But another question, Because we are a small community, the question is it apply like some very like one parcel land? Maybe they build on 4 units, 6 unit. They have to apply this kind of to, or it's only for the big project.
We can set that minimum if that's a policy decision for the commission and the council.
Okay.
We can set that minimum at whatever we want. There is a balancing act with making sure that, we don't miss those small projects. I think Commissioner McMorris talked about, making sure we don't miss those small projects. And if we set it too high, then a lot of those projects will get missed. If you set it too low, even because of rounding, even if you had a 10% minimum requirement, if you did it for a project with 4 units, it effectively is a 25% minimum because you have to have at least 1 unit. That's why we came up with 5 units as a minimum. Effectively, 5 units would be every 5 unit project would have at least 1 affordable unit, which is a 20% affordability requirement. And so I think anything lower than 5 starts to become then we're gonna curtail development of any kind.
Okay. So suggesting it's a 5 unit and up. Yeah. That's I also think about it. Otherwise all the single family, if they wanted to qualify, it's hard to build it. Okay.
I do think it makes more sense rather than talking about a minimum. And it makes more sense to raise the maximum. Raise the ceiling rather than establish the floor, because the ceiling is what creates the incentive for the developer to develop. And right now, with no minimum requirement, they're not developing.
You mean the higher requirement? I mean the story requirement. Yeah. Okay. Just a story requirement. You mean how many story we can have, or just the exact?
I mean, that's a policy decision that you have to make. But if the density bonus is 24% by the state without us doing anything, right? It jumps to 50%. It's much greater incentive for the developer. But you may have taller buildings. You may need a hook and ladder.
Yeah. So we want to see the report. So how it's happened. Yeah. We assume that what's the happen if we like 10% or 15%, whatever. Just see the developer will probably if they make a profit, how high they will be built, right? So that's kind of result we needed to know to do the study to compare it. Then I think it help us to make a decision.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, if you do establish a floor at 10% or 15%, you are going to exclude the smaller projects. They're just not.
Mayor, the data's here. We can repackage that and present that more clearly to the council and the commission when they come back.
All right. So I already have the direction. All right. Okay.
Sam, do you have the direction you need?
Okay. All right. Thank you. So we still move to okay. All right. So next item.
City Council and Planning Commission Joint Study Session, State Adopted Housing Legislation, Assembly Bill 2011 and Senate Bill 6. Associate Planner Anthony Alvarado will lead the presentation.
Yes, Mayor, members of the City Council and Chairman and members of the Planning Commission. I'm just going to do a quick introduction as Anthony sets up here. Again, thank you so much for your time this evening to allow staff to present a second affordable housing related item. And specifically, this is on Assembly Bill AB 2011 and Senate Bill SB 6. And similar to the first item, following staff's presentation, staff is seeking comments from the council and Planning Commission on next steps and potentially bringing back an ordinance similar to the first item in response to AB 2011 and SB 6. And due to the amount of information reviewed and the work involved with analyzing the existing design guidelines that the city currently has and potential code updates to develop objective design standards, the presentation this evening will be collaboratively provided, starting with Associate Planner Anthony Alvarado, followed by Senior Planner Christine Song, and then concluded by Assistant Planner Marlon Cervantes. So staff just wanted to give that quick introduction. And at this time, staff will pass the presentation to Anthony.
Thank you. Thank you, Sam. Good evening, Honorable Mayor, Vice Mayor, City Council, and Planning Commissioners. My name is Anthony Alvarado, and I'm the Associate Planner in the Planning Division. And as Samantha had previously mentioned, tonight's presentation would be a summary of some of the recently adopted state housing legislation and the adoption of objective design standards that would be utilized in reviewing projects that would be submitted under these two bills. So on September 28th, 2022, Governor Newsom signed Assembly Bill 2011 and Senate Bill 6 into effect. Both laws are intended to address the state housing needs, revitalize underutilized commercial land, and generate well-paid construction jobs. Both would become effective on July 1st of this year, 2023, and both would also have a sunset date of January 1st, 2033. So the first of the two bills that we're going to discuss tonight is Assembly Bill 2011. Assembly Bill 2011 would create the Affordable Housing and High Road Jobs Act of 2022, which would allow for housing development to be submitted if it meets specific objective standards, affordability requirements, and site criteria. The proposed project would be allowed in zones that allow for office use, retail use, or parking as a permitted, a principally permitted use. The back. So essentially in all of the commercial zones within the city. The proposed project would be allowed by right and would be subject to one of the following two streamlined review processes. The first would be a 100% affordable project in commercial zones. The second would be a mixed income housing project along commercial corridors. Since the project is defined as a use by right, it would be a ministerial review. And that would mean that the project is exempt from the requirement to go through the CEQA review process. It would not go through a public hearing. The city is also limited to a review and approval timeline as shown on the slide above, which identifies that the city must identify inconsistencies or determine that a project is incomplete within a matter of 60 days if it's less than 150 homes, or 90 days if it's over 150. As well as approval deadlines of 90 days if it's less than 150 and 180 if it's more than 150. The other items that this bill addresses is if developers are proposing to utilize this bill, they would be required to pay laborers the general prevailing wages as determined by the director of the Department of Industrial Relations. Additionally, contractors that are developing more than 50 units would be required to participate in an apprenticeship program and request dispatch of apprentices from the state approved apprenticeship program and make certain healthcare expenditures for construction craft employees. As mentioned on the previous slide, the first of the two projects that would be accepted under Assembly Bill 2011 is a 100% affordable project. For this, 100% of the units must be at a lower income level. This, of course, would exclude the manager's unit. For those units, deed restrictions for rental units would be required at 55 years, while the deed restrictions for sale units would be required for 45 years. I think that was mentioned in the previous presentation. Proposed projects would have to also meet or exceed the Mullen density, which is defined as a minimum zoning of 30 dwelling units per acre. The proposed project must complete phase one ESA and mitigate to the level of insignificance, as well as the proposed project cannot be located within 500 feet of a freeway or 3,200 feet of a refinery. So the second of the projects that is applicable with Assembly Bill 2011 is a mixed income project. So for the mixed income project, it must be located on a commercial corridor, which is along a major arterial roadway. These types of projects must provide one of the following: either 80% very low income and 5% extremely low income, or 15% lower income for rental units. The other option is 30% moderate income or 15% low income for sale units. It would require the same deed restrictions as 100% affordable projects, as well as establish demolition protections for existing affordable and rent-controlled housing, and/or sites with 4 or fewer existing residential units. Those affordable units must still have the same bedroom and bathroom ratio as market rate units, and same type of appliances, fixtures, and everything that the market rate units provide. Okay. These developments would be subject to certain density requirements based on the project site sizes, with dimensions of the commercial corridor that they're located on, and the proximity that they are to a major transit stop. The city of San Gabriel would be considered a non-metropolitan area, and thus would be subject to the following density requirements that are shown on the screen, which just going through it really quickly. 20 units per acre if the sites are less than 1 acre in size, 30 if the site is 1 acre in size or greater, and located on a commercial corridor that is less than 100 feet width, 50 units per acre if it is 1 acre or larger and located on a commercial corridor that is larger than 150 feet in width, 100 feet in width, sorry about that, and 70 units per acre if it's within a half mile of a major transit stop. So, major transit stop, I have the definition here. It is defined in section 21155 of the Public Resources Code. That is a site containing an existing rail transit station, a ferry terminal served by either a bus or rail transit service, or the intersection of 2 or more major bus routes with a frequency of service interval of 15 minutes or less during the morning and afternoon peak commute periods. This was something that staff did look into, and we need to dive into this a little bit more, but we do not believe that our major arterial streets fall within that category. So, okay. So for height standards are also provided for these projects, and if they are greater than the existing zoning code allows, that height requirement or allowance would be increased. Sites that are located on a commercial corridor less than 100 feet in width would be allowed 35 feet, while commercial corridors that have 100 feet in width or more would allow for 45 feet. And for reference, Valley Boulevard has a width dimension of 100 feet. The following setback requirements would be imposed for mixed income projects. There would not be a requirement for a front setback from that commercial corridor. On that commercial corridor, 80% of the frontage must be within 10 feet of the property line, 60% within 10 feet along the street, the side streets, and a 10-foot setback for properties adjacent to residential with a upper story setback. So the second piece of legislation that we are going to look at tonight is Senate Bill 6, which is also known as the Middle Class Housing Act of 2022. This bill would allow for residential housing as an allowable use on any parcel that is zoned for office or retail uses. Although Senate Bill 6 does not have a streamlined ministerial approval process, it does not require developers to include affordable housing units. There is the option for projects that do decide to go forward with that. They can choose to invoke Housing Accountability Act and Senate Bill 35, even if they don't comply with the underlying zoning. So I'll kind of go into that a little bit. Just summarizing Senate Bill 35. This was approved in 2017. The intent of it was to expedite and facilitate construction of affordable housing. Senate Bill 35 applies to cities and counties that do not have sufficient or have not made sufficient progress in meeting their affordable housing goals. So in an effort to meet those affordable housing goals, the bill requires cities and counties to streamline the review and approval process for these affordable housing projects through a ministerial review. So how this would be applicable to the Senate bill that we're talking about today is it would allow for a ministerial review if the project is consistent with objective design standards. General plan and zoning conformity are not required if Senate Bill 6 criteria are satisfied. And later on in this presentation, we're going to dive into what we are looking at for those objective design standards. So as far as the labor standards, it's pretty similar to Assembly Bill 2011. So Senate Bill 6 would require developers to pay laborers general prevailing wages. Additionally, contractors would be required to employ a skilled and trained workforce unless there is only one pre-qualified contractor that promises to use the skilled and trained workforce bid on the contract. As mentioned earlier, they're using just Senate Bill 6. There is no affordability requirement. However, they would still need to comply with the local inclusionary housing standards if that is moved forward with the city. And if using Senate Bill 35, those laws of affordability would apply. So the following development standards would also be applicable to projects that fall under Senate Bill 6. Just to run through them really quickly, it would be allowed in any zone that allows for office, retail, or parking area. Project sites have to be 20 acres or less. Proposed projects must be either 100% residential or a mixed-use project. 50% of that square footage is dedicated to residential space. Must be in an urbanized area or cluster, not adjacent to a site that is more than 1/3 of the square footage of it determined to be industrial use. And it must also meet or exceed that Mullen density. So both Assembly Bill 2011 and Senate Bill 6, if a developer chooses to invoke Senate Bill 35, are required to be processed through a ministerial review process. The state law requires that the city draft regulations for both bills, similar to what the city did for Senate Bill 9 last year. Additionally, the city would need to adopt objective design standards to use in order to evaluate these projects. So kind of with that, at this time, I will be passing the presentation to our senior planner, Christine Song, who will discuss the adoption of those objective design standards.
Thank you, Anthony. Good evening, Honorable Mayor, members of the City Council, and members of the Planning Commission. As Anthony previously mentioned, the objective design standards are intended to be used in ministerial reviews for eligible projects, which invoke the SB 6 and AB 2011 legislation. In the recently adopted housing element of the general plan, one of the goals included the adoption of objective design standards to expedite the approval process for housing development that qualifies for the streamlined process in order to meet the city's housing goals. Objective design standards are pretty much standards that involve no personal or subjective judgment. Essentially, these standards are created by taking existing multifamily and commercial design guidelines which can be interpreted in many different ways, and turning them into objective standards that can be measured and verified by specific parameters. Another way to look at it would be a standard that can be evaluated by a true or false statement. On the screen in front of you, there are a few sample objective design standards that have been drafted using the existing city design guidelines. As you can see, some of the standards on the far right, they all have specific dimensions that they don't require subjective judgment. These can be verified by yes or no. So for example, a permanently covered entryway or porch must be provided for each unit. That can be objectively observed whether it's been provided or not and whether it meets that standard. I do also want to clarify that these objective design standards would not be replacing the code or any other existing city regulation. It's intended to be a supplemental set of standards that would need to be met if an applicant would like to go through the streamlined process that the state allows for eligible affordable housing projects. Staff is currently working with both the city architect and city landscape architect on drafting the standards for the city. There will be 3 sets of objective design standards developed, one for all the various zones that allow multifamily residential and mixed-use development, and one for the Valley Boulevard specific plan area, and one for the Mission District specific plan area. Once the draft of the objective design standards is finalized, staff will bring the item before the Design Review Commission, as well as the Planning Commission for comments before it is brought before the City Council for consideration. The Valley Boulevard specific plan area is the city's most vital commercial corridor, and it has several pockets of residential neighborhoods throughout. The specific plan actually already has a great deal of development standards that are objective. So the goal for creating standards in this area would be to just add to those and also take some of the existing design language that's very subjective and convert it to objective standards that can apply to a variety of projects with different architectural styles and densities. The city architect and landscape architect can provide direction on this in order to maintain compatibility and preserve the neighborhood character as much as possible. Again, this is another draft objective design standard. This one speaks to entrances for projects in the Valley Boulevard specific plan area, provided as a sample for you. If a minimum of 1 exterior pedestrian entrance is visible from the street and a minimum depth of 5 feet must be provided for the building's primary entryway, I mean, that would be objective. If that's been provided, then that standard would have been met. The goal is to provide something that's clear and effective for everyone to understand, whether that's a member of the general public, a design professional, a staff member, or even a decision maker. With that said, I am going to pass it off to Assistant Planner Marlon Cervantes. Thank you.
Thank you, Christine. Good evening, Honorable Mayor, members of the City Council, and Planning Commissioners. My name is Marlon Cervantes. I'm the Assistant Planner. So I'll be talking about the Mission District specific plan and the objective design standards and how they would apply here. When the Mission District specific plan was drafted and adopted nearly 20 years ago, special care was taken to maintain the historic nature and character of the area. The plan's overall goals include ensuring community-based concepts and designs for the district, building economic vitality in the Mission District, and preserving historic architectural treasures while guiding the district's future. General goals in the plan also include encouraging and supporting mixed-use development, as well as providing housing alternatives for people wanting to walk to work and use public transportation. Along with the plan's overall and general goals, it also provides a number of key objectives for implementation of the plan. One of those objectives is architectural design. This includes providing descriptions of significant architectural styles used in the Mission District relating to composition, design details, and materials unique to each of these styles. This objective also includes establishing architectural standards for the district. Our goal when drafting the objective design standards is to complement the existing standards by providing verifiable and measurable standards that are consistent with the goal of maintaining the Mission Revival and Spanish colonial architectural style in the district. One example provided here for comparison is that a design guideline that's given in the specific plan is that details should be used as essential small-scale elements of residential character. This guideline is not measurable, nor can it be verified in an objective manner, and can be up for interpretation. Some examples of objective design standards that serve to meet this guideline are specific dimensions for door and window recesses, the inclusion of certain details such as window sills, and clear identification of materials and finishes that must be used, in this case the use of smooth trowel stucco with bullnose corners. Detail is just one aspect of the architectural design standards that's included in the creation of objective design standards for the Mission District specific plan area. Others include building massing, articulation, and roof design. Together with the help of our city architect and city landscape architect, we plan to have a comprehensive set of objective standards that will not only accompany specific plan documents and guidelines, but will also simplify the design process for projects seeking to take advantage of these Assembly and Senate bills in each respective area of the city. That concludes our presentation. Each of us is available for any questions or comments.
Does any council and commission member have factual question for staff to clarify report? Start from commission first.
I have comment for everything.
Okay.
It's good.
It's a clear.
My one concern is the building massing requirement is, I think, a little subjective. There are building styles like Tudor style and all these Wallace maps that have a uniform front and they're very tastefully done. So I do find the building massing requirement a little unnecessary. That's all.
Okay.
Yeah, just to clarify on that, is that what Commissioner Crabman was talking about? Is that something we have control over, or is that state law? We have to do it. I guess that's.
Yes. Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioners, for the question. So, basically, if we do not adopt objective design standards that developers, when they apply for these Assembly Bills 2011 or Senate Bill 6, if we don't have specific objective standards for them to follow, then they could take whatever they want to propose, and we have no say in it. It can go to Design Review Commission for review. So that's why we're working with our city architect, we're working with our landscape architect, and eventually taking it to the Design Review Commission. So we take all of these different styles into consideration and figure out objective design standards that, work well or the best they can with all these different styles. Yeah, is kind of the challenge that we're working with.
Yeah, thank you. And just to clarify that, so basically this is what we have to make things that are kind of open-ended or vague in our design guidelines. We have to just make them so that they're not vague, basically that they know exactly what they need to be doing. Okay, and I see. But yeah, thank you. It sounds like a big job for you guys, but you're doing great. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I get just going back to what Commissioner Crabman said. What you said, Commissioner Crabman, based on the size density, I couldn't tell. Is that something that that is in the design guidelines that we have a say over, like they can bring back and we can get feedback, or that we just have to do it?
This would just be part of the objective design criteria.
Oh, okay.
And one of them is the building massing. So they don't want a building that has basically a flat face.
I see.
They want something that varies every, 25 feet is what I think you have. But certain building styles do have a flat face to your shaking. So those.
Got it. Thank you.
Right side of the machine.
Clarifying question,
Vice Mayor.
One thing I didn't see in the report, good report overall, but how many potential sites do we have in San Gabriel that meet any of these criteria?
That is a very good question. I don't have that number off the top of my head, and that's something that as staff, maybe we could look at our housing element as kind of a source to go through, because I know that there are sections or portions of the housing element that identify sites for potential development. Some of them located on the commercial corridor. So we could definitely go back and maybe bring that back in our staff reports to the commissions and council.
Okay. Yeah, because it's just, to me, I can't think of anything offhand that's not being developed right now that this would even affect us. Right. Especially at prevailing wage, it's not going to happen. I mean, I don't see this as something that's happening in San Gabriel.
Right.
But these are like 2,000 units, 3,000 units when you're dealing with that size.
Right.
Thank you. Councilmember.
Just a question about AB 2011 and also SB 6. It shows that if that will require developer to pay the labor's general prevailing wages, and also I wonder that does that mean that there will be higher cost to the developer, and what is the percentage possible for each developer? I mean, if they're paying the regular wages and the prevailing wages, what is the percentage difference?
Yeah, that's another good question. I don't have the percentage difference. Pretty positive it will increase the price for developers to meet that prevailing wage criteria. That is something else that we could also look at bringing forward before the commissions and council at the next meeting.
Okay, thank you.
I do, Councilman Wu, I do have a little bit of general information on that, talking to developers. To the labor part of the project, it would add about 40% to their costs.
40%.
As an overall percentage of the development, it usually adds about 15 to 25% of the cost when you all things considered. So it makes every project about 15 to 25% more expensive.
Oh. So is that something to do with the healthcare area, anything else, or this is just specific on the wages?
It has to do with using union labor. And so not only the wages, but also the benefits and the apprenticeship programs and the other things that come along with hiring and payroll.
Why? That should be high. Thank you.
City manager, just to follow up. Also, though, they're getting incentives in terms of not having to get to bypass CEQA, streamline ministerial, that saves money as well, right? So is that factored into the cost that you just mentioned? I'm assuming they considered all that when they created the laws that's why they put those kind of incentives in there.
That's not factored into the cost. The difference is though, is you have a surety that you're not going to have to go through this process and how long that's going to take and what your project's going to look like at the end. So as we talked about in the inclusionary housing discussion, that value of money and that surety is worth a lot. So that does make up for that. The other part of it is these don't have to be sites that are already zoned for housing. And so the idea is to open up more housing throughout the state by allowing these.
So I just wanted to clarify that there is that taking into account with the prevailing wage, it seems like the legislature also considered cost savings for the developer if they do that. So I just wanted to clarify that.
So I would like to add to that you've just increased the land acquisition cost because now you've upzoned everything. So you're taking it from one hand and put it in the other. So you avoided all the environmental, but now I have land that I couldn't develop on before that I can. So you've created a market per se of upzoning, which means now my land is more valuable because I could do more with it. So I'm going to sell my land for more money. You've increased the cost in land acquisition by a significant amount, because when it pencils out to right now, I can make 20 units, but because of this legislation, I can do 50 units. My land just became more valuable. So I'm not selling it at the rate I would have if you go and build 20 units on it. So it's kind of, and then you add the wages on top of that. You've added hard costs, soft costs, and percentages all on. I don't see anyone developing under this in San Gabriel. They have, because you have to get 2,000, 3,000 units before this makes any sense. I mean, it's that scale. This is a scaling. It's not meant for 100 units.
Yeah.
What's that? Yeah, it's high rise. It's downtown LA high rise.
So, Chief City Clerk, do we have any public comments?
No comments, Mayor.
So, no time for the discussion.
And just to clarify, Mayor, we don't need any direction tonight. We were just hoping to preview this for the commission and just for information only. So this will end up back at the commission and then the council eventually.
I like that.
That's fine. Yeah. Just want to clarify for the
information. Wait for further action.
the take the information. This then all the legislation like bill. So we have to follow up, or we cannot ignore. Right? We still should based on our city to do something. Okay.
That's right. If we don't have these design standards, the crux of the presentation is if we don't have design standards, that means that developers can pretty much develop what they want because they don't have to follow the majority of our codes.
Okay.
If we have objective design standards, then we can hold them to those design standards.
Okay. So that's the staff needed to do, bring this report.
That's right.
Okay.
That's right.
All right.
So if we don't create design standards, then we get Khrushchev's like the Soviets built. You get 5-story boxes.
Okay. All right. So who else? Okay. So if none, so we can. Okay.
Yeah, right.
So the meeting, okay, meeting adjourned. At the next regular city council meeting will be held on Tuesday, March 7, 2023 at 6:30 p.m. Meeting adjourned at 10:21.
And I think we're